Okay, very good afternoon, everybody. Today is the fourth day of our presentations. Today, semester 1 students in this afternoon session are going to make presentations on Victorian literature. Let us have a look at their topics of today's presentations. So we'll have first by Sanjay, and he will make presentation on satire and irony in the importance of being earnest, followed by internet error there. Which login ID you have connected there? Which login is it? Maybe there is a limit of 1 GB. Okay. Okay, I'll get it connected and continue having a look at the topics. Okay, SIDDHIBA's presentation will be on triviality and seriousness in Oscar Wilde's play, the importance of being earnest. There is no need to keep all capital letters. There is no problem in using all capital letters in the title also. But if you follow one particular system, then you can. There is no need of this. You can use all capital also in the title. Many people do use even small letters like A and D also is all in capital. But we follow a system where we don't use here all the capital letters. Radhika's will be on feminist analysis of the importance of being earnest. Try to differentiate between two types of inverted commas, double inverted commas and single inverted commas. Single for title, double for quotation. So when you handwrite your answers in the exams, when you handwrite at that time also, when you use quotations, use double inverted comma. When you use titles, single inverted comma. On the first day, we have given example of Macbeth. Because in Macbeth, whether you are talking about tragedy or about character, you have to differentiate. If it is a tragedy, then single inverted comma. If it is character, without inverted comma. So these are why this different punctuation marks are used for specific purposes. Mansi's will be on identity at work, social masks in the importance of being earnest. Keywords like work should be capital W, mask also capital M. GRISHMA's will be on Wilde and the art of paradox, the play as a manifesto of aesthetic irony. VANITABEN's will be on from facts to fancy, evolution of education from Victorian England to the modern world. SANDHYA's will be on the failure of fact, Dickens's humanist rebellion against rationalism. SIDDHARTH G. CHAUHAN's presentation on the world of hard times, morality, reform and modern echoes. KRUTI's will be on reinforcing Victorian marriage norms in Hardy's Jude the Obscure. Jude the Obscure should be in single inverted comma. Mitali will be making it on Sue Bridehead, the new women in Hardy's Jude the Obscure. Priyanka's will be on Jude the Outsider, alienation and the anti-hero in Hardy's final novel. Sagar will be making it on Thomas Hardy's Poetry and Philosophy, a critical study. Priya on psychological depth and human motivation in Robert Browning's dramatic monologues. Nidhi, moral dilemmas in Ibsen and their resonance in today's ethical debates. There can be small t. Mulraj, hard times and Dickens's concept of imagination. You have to see this apostrophe that you have used after Times S apostrophe and Dickens S apostrophe you have used. So check the rules of apostrophe. Apostrophes, when are they used? That you have to see. And then rectify the title accordingly. SIDDHARTH and CHAUHAN will be on God is Silent, Society Speaks, The Death of Divine Order and Rise of Human Hypocrisy in Victorian Literature. So that will be the last presentation for the day. Okay? Let us start with the first one. Okay? The presenters one also you can reconnect. SIDDHARTH has already asked the question before the presentation also. Before the presentation began, he has already put the question. So that way we આપણે કોઈ serious બાબતને કેમ એકદમ શુલ્લક બનાવી દે, triviality માં આપણે લઈ જાય, that you can see here. So our purpose is that you listen the presentation and whatever is presented, you ask question out of curiosity to know more. That is the idea. Question now પ્રશ્ન શું હોય કે પ્રેઝન્ટેશન થાય એમાં તમને થોડી ક્યુરિયોસિટી થાય, આમાં વધુ જાણીએ, આના વિશે એમને ખબર હશે, એ રીતે તમે પ્રશ્ન પૂછો. So that is how it is normally to be done. We know that you don't do like that. તમે અચાનક જાગો કે મારે પ્રશ્ન પૂછવાનો છે, શું બોલે છે તો ખબર જ ન હોય, તેનું પ્રેઝન્ટેશન ચાલે કઈ ખ્યાલ જ ન હોય, પછી ફટાક દઈને જનરેટિવ એઆઈ માંથી પ્રશ્ન કાઢીને પૂછી નાખી, ત્યારે બે સરખા પ્રશ્ન આપી દે, એના ફોલોઅર બંનેને સરખો જ આપે, બંને એ પોસ્ટ કરી નાખ્યો, પછી ખ્યાલ આવે કે આ તો પૂછાઈ ગયો ઓલરેડી. મોર્નિંગ ઇટ સો હેપન કે બીજા કોઈનો પ્રશ્ન ડિસ્પ્લે થયો એ વાંચી નાખ્યો, અને એમ જ નથી કે આ મારો પ્રશ્ન નથી, આ કોઈ બીજાનો હું વાંચું છું. એટલે આપણે એબ્સન્ટ માઇન્ડેડ હોઈએ. Whose question am I reading? That also I don't know. This. But first you have to listen the presentation, and then you have to ask. It is not a network issue; it is a different issue. This is not network issue. So when you listen the presentation, then you have some question, and then you ask. But that is what we need to concentrate. We know that બધા સોલે સોલમાં તો કોન્સન્ટ્રેશન રહી જ શકવાનું નથી, એટલીસ્ટ બેમાં તો રાખીએ. એટલે આપણે તો બધાને નથી કહેતા હોતો, એટલે બેને શાંતિથી સાંભળીએ અને પછી એમાંથી પ્રશ્ન પૂછીએ. એમણે જે પ્રેઝન્ટેશન કરેલું હોય એને લગતો પ્રશ્ન આપણે પૂછીએ એમાંથી. Yes, you can start. Share again.
Hello everyone. Good afternoon to all. My name is SANJAY RATHOD and today's my presentation's topic is Satire and Irony in the Importance of Being Earnest. Here is my academic details and presentation details. Here is the table of content. My research question is, how does Wilde use multiple ironic techniques simultaneously in The Importance of Being Earnest to satirize Victorian society beneath the surface of comedy? And the hypothesis of this presentation is Wilde's use of 5 ironic devices like situational, reversal, comparison, truth, and literal mind, plus moral inversion creates such dense satire that audience laugh while being criticized. Explain both initial critical confusion and the play lasting observation, subversive power. The architecture of Wilde's satirical method. Wilde employs a pattern of ironic inversion, where character advocate actually social practice as moral standard. The play Play function as one sustained metaphor requiring aesthetic detachment for intelligent enjoyment. So recognize epigraph as condemned out of its idea and emotions rather than decorative wit. Contemporary critics miss the satire's depth, dismissing play as cynical to avoid confronting social realities. Characters derived their ideals for conduct from the actual practice of their societies, become literal-minded victims of their environment. Algernon's genuine outrages, woman flirting with husband, is simply washing one's cleaning line in public. The technique has satirical ancestry in Swift's Gulliver and the Fielding's Jonathan Wild. In modern parallel, how satire exposes normalized corruption by treating it as explicit policy. In situational irony, Len's reply, I didn't think it polite to listen to Algernon's piano playing demonstrate false propriety out of all proportion. Jack condemned false impression while living in Ernest in town and Jack in the country. Situational irony refers beyond itself to the larger dramatic context. In contemporary application, recognize how context exposes inconsistency between stated value and actions. In reversal irony, divorces are made in heaven. Reverse is proverb without requiring contextual knowledge. Reversal irony need only refer within itself through incongruity between moralistic tone and reverse among content. The effect called conventional morality into question by turning it upside down and reversing its implication. In modern relevance, how reversing platitude exposes their hollowness or reveals uncomfortable truth. Irony of comparison. Comparison irony works through undercutting, like comparison downward, or overstatement, like comparison upward. Gwendolen's highest ideals in Age of Ideals is to love some of the name of Ernest. And morality becomes a matter of upper class convention. Jack's name question labeled metaphysical speculation when it's actually crucial to plot. In modern application, recognize how trivializing serious matter or aggrandizing trivia exposes misplaced value. Speaking truth ironically. Truth irony represent reality distorted only enough to force our recognition of it. Lady Bracknell's pronouncement, engagement should surprise girl, hardly a matter that she could be allowed to arrange for herself. She readily admits this unpleasant truth as assertion. This is how it should be. It is true, but by any standard it shouldn't be, and that is the irony. The literal mind. Lady Bracknell demonstrates ignorant literal mindedness. Losing both parents seem like carelessness. Algernon exploits literalism, treats Jack's fictional mourning as facts, rendering him quite powerless. Cecily's mastery accuses Algernon of hypocrisy for not being actual victim despite its reputation. Only in society of surface can hypocrisy succeed by manipulating surface. Bunburyism, the irony of escaping hypocrisy through hypocrisy. Bunburying represents systematic escape from repressive convention through respectable fictional obligation. The central irony is pretend is the price the Bunburyists pay for freedom from the pretense of convention. Title pun capture moral failure. Conformists pretend to be earnest but aren't, and protagonists pretend to be earnest but aren't. Wilde argues all normal Victorians are performs Bunburyists leading double lives. In contemporary parallel, how restrictive norms inevitably generate organized deception as severe mechanism. Gender inversion. The inverted relationship is the norm of the play, with women hard head, cold-blooded, efficient, and men who simply crumple. Gwendolen's paradox. The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for the man. Lord Bracknell's non-appearance is symbolic since he practically a non-person. The satire exposes Victorian gender ideology and performative fiction contradiction by actual power dynamics. 400 ironies. Pogue identifies approximately 400 irony inversion in the language of the play. Multiple irony operates simultaneously on single lines, truth plus situation targeting Victorian morality. This density explains why critics initially refused to give the play full credit as comedy. Why Wilde's satirical technique remained revolutionary? Wilde achieved oblique perspective on society's shallowness through direct ridicule of the shallow art in which it sees its reflection. The subtle margin of matter and form make Earnest an intellectual tour de force and comic masterpiece. Recent critics recognize the play not as Victorian relic but as distributingly modern work. Its satirical arsenal inversion, multiple ironic layer, structural parody creates comedy that never deads. In contemporary lesson, the most effective satire operates beneath conscious awareness, making audience laugh while being criticized. Here are my references, and thank you all. Now stage is free for questioning.
So Sanjay, my question is that does Wilde's polished epigrammatic style risk undermining its own critique by beautifying the triviality in targets?
No, the style is the critic. Wilde weaponized the aristocracy's own superficial polish form. The epigram to expose its vacuity, the aesthetic beauty of the language, isn't a diagram from the message. It is the very medium through which the message is delivered.
My question is that is bun-burying merely a thematic device or it the engine of the play's farcical plot?
It is the engine. Bourbonering is the foundational lie that necessitates all subsequent deception, creating the place a semantical and artificial plot. The plot isn't just about fiction, it is mechanism or structural manifest of the fiction. Thank you. This is all from my side.
So, hello everyone, myself SIDDHIBA GOHIL, and my today's presentation topic is Triviality and Seriousness in Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest. So, these are my academic details and presentation details. Restart? Okay. So, hello everyone, myself SIDDHIBA GOHIL, and my today's topic is Triviality and Seriousness in Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest. These are my presentation details and academic details. Table of content. So, my research question is, how does Oscar Wilde employ the literary technique of inversion, treating serious matters as trivial and vice versa, to satirize the moral and social hypocrisy of the late Victorian aristocratic class in The Importance of Being Earnest? My hypotheses are, by consistently inverting the accepted values of the Victorian era, Wilde uses triviality as a deliberate narrative strategy to expose the superficiality and moral emptiness of the upper class, arguing that style and appearance have fully supplanted sincerity and duty. So, The next topic is introduction. So we can see that how the significance of the plays, the subtitle, a tribal comedy for serious people. This immediately establishes the central theme of inverted values, inviting the audience to treat a tribal plot seriously and the serious social issues flippantly. We can see that the play embodies Wilde's philosophy of aestheticism, where art and style are prioritized over moral instruction. This is why the characters speak in epigrams and prioritize appearances. Definition of earnest. The word itself carries the dual meaning of sincerity and gravity, the proper name setting up the central pun. The plot demonstrates that being earnest is more important than being earnest. We can see that while utilizes the technique of inversion, treating serious matters like marriage, death, and identity with triviality, and triviality matters like food, fashion, a name with utmost seriousness. To satire the hypocrisy and superficiality of the Victorian upper class. So the next topic is marriage as a social game. We can see that Algernon views marriage not as romance but at the end of excitement. The institution is a trap to be avoided unless financial necessity detects otherwise. Servants view Lane's cynical view that marriage is reason for champagne downwarding or a consequence of misunderstanding. The lower class recognizes the phrase of upper class matrimony. The next point is the Lady Bracknell's pragmatism. She explicitly states marriage is a matter of business and social alliance, dismissing emotion entirely. Her goal is property acquisition and maintaining social link, not love or partnership. We can see that marriage is seen as insignificant by male characters, becoming a burning part for Algernon and Jack, completely devoid of genuine feelings. The next point topic is the escape of berberine. We can see the creation of fictitious character is an absolute necessity for escaping moral duty and social obligations or boring duties. The serious responsibility of the gentleman is treated as an annoying inconvenience. Barbering as art. Algernon is serious about barbering because one must be serious about something if one wants to have any amusement in life. The act of lying, a lie is evaluated as a critical, sophisticated art form. Double life is normal. The practice of bun-burning suggests that the structures of Victorian morality were so sophisticating that leading a double life was the only honest way to function in society. Plot mechanism. Barbering is simple, a mechanism that sets in motion the prosperously elaborate plot of mistaken identities, but it serves as a powerful critic of social destructions. The next topic is death and foundlings. The fictional death. We can see that how Jack casual planned to kill of Ernest due to a sow chill after having been set down to Australia illustrate how easily a serious subject is manipulated for convenience. The death is treated as a simple scheduling conflict. The lost handbag, the most serious aspect of Jane's identity, his parenting and birth, is resolved by the most trivial of objects, a handbag left in cloakroom. The gravity of his entire life story rests on a piece of forgotten luggage. We can see that Miss Prism's confession, the reveal of that Miss Prism accidentally placed the baby in a handbag and the manuscript in the pram, is treated with a matter of fact, calm, trivializing, and the seriousness of a life-changing mistake into a more literary distraction. Lady Bracknell's reaction. Bracknell's famous line, a handbag transforms profound personal history into a source of incredulously upper class comedy. The next point is the absolute necessity of earnest. We can see that a precondition, not a quality. For Gwendolen and Cilici, the name earnest is a sole requirement for a husband, inspiring absolute confidence. They are engaged to a word, not a man. Gwendolen's immediate dismissal of the name Jack, it sounds music and does not thrill. Her decision is based purely on sound and romantic association. The ideal of the name Ernest represents the ideal Victorian husband, respectable, sincere, and solid. But the character pursue only the signifier and ignore the insignificant. In we can see the unimportant things like the name are treated like a life matter by the female characters. The name completely outweighs the character. The next topic is the crisis of a cucumber sandwiches. We can see that Algernon's great distress and genuine outrage over the absence of cucumber sandwiches, which he has consumed himself. The lack of specific food item is treated as a profound betrayal of social duty. The muffin battle. Jack's intense focus on Algernon drinking his vintage Perrier Jot Brunt and devouring every single muffin as the ultimate proof of his moral tribute. The consumption of food is used as a weapon in a personal war of manners. We can see that Cilician Gwendolen's debate over the property of mourning attire for Jack's fictitious death. They are focused not on a grief but on the social rules and fashion detecting the correct way to look sad. The play suggests that the consumption of correct food and adherence to fashion are the only remaining serious rituals for the idly rich. Lady Bracknell's interrogation. We can see that Lady Bracknell's detailed rapid fire interrogation of Jack treats matter of immense importance. With mechanical triviality, she is a force of nature driven by shallow and material. We can see that the flaw is not poor character or important, but Jack's unknown parenting and being found in a handbag, a triviality evaluated to a capital offense that threatens her rigid social structure. Her acceptance of Cilici's lies about her age because accurate about her age looks so calculating. Demonstrate her inverted moral code, sincerity is vulgar, artifice is proper. She functions as the embodiment of the oppressive, hypocritical Victorian society while is critiquing the language and epigrams. We can see that epigrams in married life, there three is company and two is none. Or divorces are mad in heaven. Flip transitional wisdom to its head, forcing the audience to momentarily accept the inversion of profound, masking depth. The polished, brilliant surface of the dialogue ensures the serious philosophical point are delivered with a casual, flippant tone, prioritizing style and wit over emotional sincerity. The characters use language to hide their true feelings or therefore. We can see the rejection of melodrama. The epigrams are essential to maintaining the light trivial tone, preventing the play from slipping into serious social commentary or melodrama. Satire and intent. We can see that the play is a satirical comedy of manners, aiming to ridicule the aristocracy's hypocrisy, frivolity, superficiality, artificiality, and money-mindedness. The characters wear a mask of manners while lying anytime they choose. Their outward earnestness hidden their inward superficiality and silliness. The play's light tone is its most effective weapon against social rigidity. Unlike traditional Victorian drama, Wilde offers no moral corrective. The characters are rewarded for their frivolity, which the ultimate satirical sting. The structure itself suggests that artificiality is true state of the Victorian elite. So, conclusion, hypothesis confirmed, reiterate how the central inversion highlights the absurdity of the social conventions. While critics, the hypothesis is proven style. Triviality trumped over the substance seriousness throughout the play. The happy ending as a financial critic, the final resolution where all the serious problems, identity, lineage, and poverty are solved by a single trivial coincidence, a lost bag. Confirm that the play's deliberate light nature ending on a note of blissful yet absurd artificiality. We can see that Jake's last line, final line, I have now realized for the first time in my life that the vital importance of being earnest is the ultimate paradox. He has only realized that importance of the name, not the virtue, thus cementing the play's satirical inversion. Wilde suggests that its fashionable Victorian word, the only thing truly serious is the need of to escape the burden of serious itself. So these are my learning outcomes. References. Thank you. Question are welcome.
My question is, how does Oscar Wilde employ inversion to satirize the social hypocrisy of the Victorian aristocrat in The Importance of Being Earnest?
We can see that Wilde uses inversion to satire the upper class by treating serious matters like marriage and identity as trivial, and trivial matters like food or a name as serious. This shows the elite prioritize style and appearance over genuine sincerity. Next question.
So my question is that what role does Lady Bracknell's famous interrogation scene play as the central agent of satire in the work?
Lady Bracknell's interrogation acts as a central agent of satire by embodying oppressive Victorian society. She mechanically reduces a person's worth to shallow material details like income, showing that artifice is proper while sincerity is worker. We can see that how she not accept Jack because he does not have a parents while he was found in handbag. We can see that she only give importance to materialistic things, and she does not approve manners or person's point of view. So that's all from my side. Thank you.
Hello everyone, myself Radhika Mehta, and today I will represent this topic, feminist analysis of the importance of being earnest. So these are my academic details and presentation details, table of content. And now let's move on the topic, research question and hypothesis. So my research question is, how does Oscar Wilde utilize irony, wit, and the performance of identity in the importance of being earnest and a woman of no importance to critique restrictive Victorian gender roles and the era society's hypocrisies? So the hypothesis is Wilde's plays use the paradoxical significance of superficiality to expose the arbitrary nature of Victorian social codes by making trivial matters central and serious matters peripheral. Wilde demonstrates that identity is less about innate selfhood and more about a rigid gendered performance sanctions by society. So let's move on the introduction. Before I want to say something, the meaning of earnest is not justified by our class and economical background. We can always judge by their classisms and economical and financial background, but we can't judge their goodness, skills and manners of real life. So the meaning of earnest is not only power of money, but always goodness, skills, manners, and the all part of their a good life also. So the introduction is this presentation we will explore Oscar Wilde's sophisticated use of wit, paradox, and constructed identity to critique restrictive Victorian gender roles and social hypocrisy. We will analyze the contrasting approaches in the importance of being earnest and a woman of no importance, as we can see that positioning this place in the context of Wilde's broader engagements with the women fashion, particularly during his time editing the Woman's World. The underlining argument is that Wilde uses the superficial to expose the significant. Now, Wilde and the Victorian content, uh, the Woman's World, Wilde's engagement with gender issues was not confined to drama. His editorship of the magazine The Woman's World reveals his approach to shaping and often satirizing Victorian discourse on women's lives. So we will use these things. Zephyrine Green argues that Wilde's approach to the women's world was highly performative and aesthetic, seeking to frame women's issues within a style, non-political sphere. This editorial philosophy and prioritizing style over substance directly parallels the theoretically found in his comedies, where the presentations of an idea often overshadow its moral or political weight. Now let's move on the topic, the satirical lens on gender in the importance of being earnest. So we will see that the play's central motive, the invented persona earnest, is the profound critique of the social constructions of male identity. Jake and Algernon's use of Bunburying creating of fictitious identity for illicit leisure exposes the hypocrisy of the Victorian gentleman who requires a double life to maintain social decorum. Joel Feynman suggests that the play is about the significance of literature itself, where identity is a textual invention. Furthermore, the women, particularly Lady Bracknell, act as the first gatekeepers of these artificial social orders, democratizing the power women held in policing acceptable gender performance. Now let's move feminist critique of the importance of being earnest. So while often classified as a social satire, the play contains a strong underlining feminist critique by the exposing the constraints placed on women, particularly regarding marriage, as we know that about, and suggest that the play's emphasize of on the triviality of courtship. Gwendolen only caring for the name as a earnest, so reveals the tribal public sphere women were limited to. Their significant decisions selecting a husband were based on arbitrary and superficial criteria imposed by society. By presenting the absurd hoops women must jump through while satirizing the very institutions that define their lives. So now let's move the examining morality in a woman of no importance. Moving from farce to a social drama, a woman of no importance directly challenges the moral double standard for man and woman. The plot centers on Mrs. Arbuthnot, a woman ostracized for having a child out of wedlock, and her son's father's Lord Ilgroth's, who remains a celebrated social figure. The title itself is an ironic statement. The woman is rendered of no importance by the society because of a past mistake, while the man faces no such social death. This stark contrasts highlight the rigid and unfair Victorian systems that punishes the woman while excusing the men. Now, identity as performance, the self and the others. Mary Liddon's works on myself and offers a framework for understanding how female identity is constructed by external forces in Wilde's play. So, in Wilde's social critics, characters are often defined by the others, the judgmental society around them, the fallen woman, as like Mrs. Arbuthnot, or the perfect ideal girl, as we know that Cecily and Gwendolyn are identities thrust upon them, not chosen by them. The central conflict in both plays is the struggle between the self one is and the self one is allowed to be. And this instability is in identity, whether it's the main inventing a nest or the woman conforming to a type, is what gives Wilde's literature its lasting significance. Now, finally, conclusion and synthesis. Oscar Wilde plays are not merely light entertainment, they are powerful, aesthetically driven tools for social critique by employing paradox and the performance of identity. And by engaging with the public discourse on gender, Wilde successfully established Victorian norms. So, whether through the satire of marriage in earnest or the expose of the moral double standards in a woman of no importance, while uses his unique aesthetic to foreground the restrictive and often absurd nature of gender roles directed by the Victorian era. So, forcing his audience to question the difference between appearance and the reality. These are my learning outcomes. These are references. And thank you. Now it's your turn for questioning.
My question is, in what way does Lady Bracknell represent both a critique of participation in patriarchal structure?
Okay, so the Lady Breakneck is upholds and critiques patriarchy as a powerful metric. She enforces its rule like arranged marriage and class control. So, yet her dominance and authority ironically subvert traditional gender roles, as we know about that. Revealing how women can manipulate patriarchal power for their own advantage. Next one.
So my question is, how does the play critique the institution of marriage from a feminist perspective?
The play is criticized like marriage as a social contract driven divided by sorry the play is like marriage is a social contract and wealth, class, and status rather than love. So it exposes how women are conformed by patriarchal expectation, valued for social position and obedience rather than individuality, thus criticizing the lack of female autonomy in Victorian marriage. Thank you. This is from my side.
Hello everyone, myself Mansi Makwana, and today's my presentation topic is identity at work, social marks in the importance of being earnest. These are my academic and presentation details. These are table of contents, and these are my research question and the hypothesis. So my research question is, how does Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest use the motive of the mask and social performance to critique Victorian notions of identity, morality, and sincerity? So hypothesis is, whilst the importance of being earnest presents identity as performative construct rather than a fixed truth, through irony, parody, and the symbolism of the mask, Wilde critiques the moral duplicity of Victorian society, suggesting that authenticity itself is a form of artifice. Move to introduction. Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest explored the constant tension between appearances and reality, exposing how social respectability in Victorian England depends on deceptions and pretense rather than sincerity. Wilde used wit, irony, and satire to mock the seriousness of Victorian life, revealing that the values of earnestness and morality are often hollow performances meant to impress society. Then, Wilde and the Mask, aesthetic philosophy. Oscar Wilde believed that both art and life are theatrical, where individuals consciously perform roles to create beauty and meaning. Second is the masks as creative expressions. In Wilde's The Aesthetic Philosophy, the mask symbolizes creation rather than concealment. Then critique of Victorian morality. Whilst the importance of being earnest served as a caricature of Victorian manners and moral rigidity, exposing how the upper class valued appearances and propriety over genuine virtue. Wilde transforms social hypocrisy into comedy, revealing that Victorian identity is carefully maintained masks, not an authentic moral condition. Dual lives, Bunbury and the performed selves. Double lives of characters. Jack and Algernon adopt alternate identities, Jack as Ernest and Algernon through Bunbury to navigate social expectation and enjoy personal freedom. And hypocrisy as social norm, while implies that leading a double life is not abnormal, rather hypocrisy underpins the functioning of society, revealing that masks are necessary to maintain social order. Then performance and parody of the self. Parody of a stable self, while challenges the Victorian idea of a fixed moral self by showing that his characters act their way into existence, performing role to navigate social expectations. Personality through performance. According to Balkin, Wilde's character realize personality through performance, meaning is identity emerges through social interaction, role playing, and self fashioning rather than being innate. And also, such as language as a mask, Gwendolyn's obsession with the name Ernest demonstrates that language and social labels functions as masks, shaping desire and perceptions more than actual character. Then modern relevance. Wilde's concept of social marks anticipates modern identity construct on social media, where individuals curate images, highlight selective truths, and present idealized versions of themselves to gain social approval. Then postmodern selfhood. The play's humor reflects a postmodern understanding of selfhood, portraying identity as fragmented, performative, and consciously constructed rather than fixed or innate. Also timeless question of authenticity. Whilst raises a universal question about human behavior, are we truly authentic, or are we always performing roles dictated by society? These are my learning outcomes through this presentation. And move to conclusion. Wilde uses comedy to reflect the complex ways identity is performed and constructed within Victorian society, showing that social behavior is often of artful expression rather than innate truth. To be earnest in Wilde's world means embracing artifice, suggesting that through performance and carefully constructed appearances, deeper truth about society, desire, and human nature are revealed. These are my references, and thank you. Now, if you have any question, feel free to ask me.
So, Mansi, my question is, can Wilde's concept of the social mask be seen as empowering self-expression in modern life, or does it highlight the loss of authenticity in performance-driven culture?
So whilst idea on concept of the social marks can be seen in two ways. On one hand, it can be seen as empowering self-expression. People can choose how they want to present themselves and create their own identities, just like on social media. On the other hand, it can also show a loss of authenticity because when people keep performing or pretending to fit in, it becomes hard to know them. Anyone else?
So my question is, what does the Wilde's idea that life intimates art influence his portrayal of character who performs role in the importance of being earnest?
So Wilde's idea that life imitates art is shown in the importance of being earnest through the characters uh, who perform their roles to make their lives more interesting and more beautiful. People like Jane and Algernon creates four identities, earnest and Bunbury, as if they are acting in the play. So thank you. This is from my side.
Good afternoon, everyone. Myself, GRISHMA RAVAL, and today I will be presenting on the topic of Oscar Wilde and the Art of Paradox, the play as a manifesto of aesthetic irony. These are my academic and presentation details, my table of contents. My research question asks that can Wilde's plays be read as philosophical manifestos where performance and artifice expose the contradictions of sincerity and truth in the Victorian life? So, hypothesis is the importance of being earnest by Oscar Wilde functions as his aesthetic manifesto, which dramatizes the idea that performance and artifice are not moral deceptions but are essential forms of truth. And the play itself is a self conscious act of aesthetic rebellion and a comic stage version of Wilde's philosophical essays. So, beginning with the introduction, what Wilde and the cult of aesthetic paradox talks about is Oscar Wilde stands at the intersection of art, philosophy, and social rebellion, and he is known for his dazzling wit and theatrical brilliance. And he shaped a unique space in the aesthetic movement at the late 19th century. And his place, especially the importance of being earnest, is demonstrating how paradox becomes both an artistic technique and a critique of the Victorian morality. So, for Wilde, paradox is not simply a figure of speech, but it is a worldview, a way to challenge the rigid binaries like truth versus falsehood, virtue versus vice, and seriousness versus triviality. So his art is exposing hypocrisy by reversing expectations and is finding truth in their contradictions. So his own life mirrored his art, and he performed identity, wit, and rebellion in equal measure. So the aesthetic movement and the ideology of art for art's sake. So in the aesthetic movement, which was led by thinkers like Walter Pater and John Ruskin, advocated for beauty as the ultimate purpose of art. So their idea, which famously summarized in the phrase art for art's sake, it rejected the moral or didactic function of literature. And here Wilde absorbed this philosophy and he expanded it and made beauty theatrical and his irony philosophical. So, in the decay of dying, Wilde's character Vivian here is declaring that lying, the telling of beautiful, untrue things, is the proper aim of art. So, here Wilde is celebrating the imagination over realism, claiming that life imitates art far more than art imitates life. So his aesthetic irony emerges through this tension, and by defending beautiful lies, he exposes the hypocrisy of the Victorian truth. So Wilde's version of aestheticism thus is becoming self-aware, humorous, and subversive. So it is transforming artistic detachment into a form of moral protest and irony that mocks moral preaching by turning it into style. Then the function of paradox, which Wilde is using in his dramatic style. So paradox here in Wilde's plays is operating as both a rhetorical weapon and philosophical lens. So his famous epigrams, the truth is rarely pure and never simple, or in matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing, which compresses satire, irony, and social commentary into single lens. So these paradoxes undermine the conventional morality while preserving charm and wit. And the result we see is double layered dialogue. On the surface, characters seem frivolous, and underneath, they just articulate sophisticated critiques of hypocrisy, gender norms, and bourgeois vanity. So, Wilde's paradoxes blur the boundaries between seriousness and play, which creates a unique dramatic rhythm. And laughter in his plays is not escapist, but is reflecting, and it invites the audience to recognize the contradictions in their own society. So then if we see aesthetic irony and how the subversion of the Victorian morality happened, then Wilde's aesthetic irony lies in his ability to blend elegance with rebellion, and his plays ridicule the Victorian respectability, and by using beauty and wit as his instruments of subversion, the characters like Algernon, Moncrief, and Lady Bracknell perform exaggerated versions of societal roles, revealing the absurdity of moral class and conventions. So the aesthetic irony differs from simple satire in Wilde's plays because he does not preach or moralize. Instead, he is performing detachment, and the artist is seen as an observer who mocks the society through elegance. And this approach reflects Wilde's personal philosophy, and that style itself is a moral stance and a way of resisting dull conformity. So, through irony, he is critiquing not just the social hypocrisy, but also the very seriousness with which the Victorians defined morality. And his laughter is a form of liberation and artful rebellion, which is disguised as charm in his works. So, if we talk about the importance of being earnest, the play as a manifesto, then it serves as Wilde's comic manifesto of aesthetic irony, and every contradiction which we see in the play, like earnestness versus triviality, truth versus performance, identity versus disguise, embodies Wilde's paradoxical worldview. And the play's brilliance lies in how it turns the moral language into farce and farce into moral insight. And through witty epigrams and mistaken identities, Wilde is dramatizing his central paradox that truth often hides beneath performance. And when Gondolin and Cecily fall in love with the name Ernest, Wilde is mocking the Victorian ideals of sincerity, showing that how identity is constructed by appearances and desires. And in this way, the play is becoming an aesthetic statement and a defense of artifice as the most honest expression of human life. So here, Wilde's laughter is becoming philosophical, and he teaches that art, not morality, gives meaning to existence. So, to conclude, if I talk about his legacy of paradox and play, that it is both a style and a statement, and by merging aestheticism with irony, he is creating a theater where form itself is becoming a rebellion, and his plays invite us to laugh, but behind that laughter is lying a profound critique of truth, identity, and moral rigidity. So, his aesthetic irony is redefining comedy as a serious mode of thought where beauty can challenge authority and paradox can reveal deeper truths. So, this influence extends beyond the Victorian drama and it is shaping modernist as well as the postmodern art, queer aesthetics, and contemporary theories of performativity. So, the paradox which Wilde is using endures because it captures a timeless truth that art, like life, is most sincere when we embrace or it is embraced by its own contradictions. So if my research question and hypothesis are justified, that the importance of being earnest exemplifies how Wilde's drama operates as both entertainment and philosophical expression, and the play's reliance on disguise, irony, and double lives is exposed, and the artificial foundations of Victorian morality are being seen, which proves that sincerity and truth were often performances themselves as well. So Wilde is using comedy to challenge the conventional binaries of truth and falsehood and suggests that artifice is not deception but a higher aesthetic form of truth. So hence, the play functions as Wilde's aesthetic manifesto, which is a theatrical embodiment of his philosophy that celebrates performance, beauty, and rebellion against moral rigidity, fully aligning with the proposed question and my hypothesis. So the learning outcome where I understood how Wilde is using the paradox and epigrams, how he explored the aesthetic irony and subversion of the Victorian norms. Then I interpreted Ernest as a comic manifesto, and then I related it with to the aesthetic movement with Wilde, and then recognized his influence on modern postmodern literary theory, and overall this enhanced my critical thinking about form, critique, and philosophy as well. These are my references, and thank you so much. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask.
My question is to you, while mock Victorian moral rigidity, so what current social norms or moral performances might be mocked if he were alive today?
So, if Oscar Wilde was alive today in the contemporary times, then he might mock the cancel culture or the politics going around at this time. He might mock them as well, and he might also, if he might write a work at this time, then he might show it in a way which he highlighted in his works about the Victorian society, that how they use facade and artifice, and from the outer and exterior side they were all brilliantly doing well, but from the inside they were very much prude. So in contemporary times also he might mock the politics like that, and he might write a work paralleling the Victorian society at that time. Thank you. Does anyone else have any question?
So my question is, how might Wilde interpreted The rise of influencer culture, where personality often blurs in with performance.
So, as we all know that the rise of influencer culture is very much high at this time. So they are preaching something else and they are practicing something else. So while will appreciate them as well as he will show see them as aesthetic delight and consider them as characters performing on the stage in the contemporary times, but also he will mock them because they use superficiality and artifice to hinder the truth which should be shown. So he might use satire, paradox as well, and irony to ridicule these things as well. Thank you so much. That is it from my side.
So, hello everyone. This is BARAIYA. Today, my presentation topic is from facts to fancy evolution of education from Victorian England to the modern world. So, today I will talk about how education has changed from the rigid fact based system of Victorian England to the modern creative and holistic approach. So we will see how imagination and creativity have gradually become important in learning. These are my academic details and presentation details. This is table of contents. My research question is that how education evolved from the rigid fact-based system of Victorian England as criticized by Charles Dickens in Hard Times to a modern imagination-driven child-centered model, and what impact has this transformation had on the overall development of children. My hypothesis is that how transformation from facts to fancy has led to better educational outcomes as modern approaches nurture creativity, emotions, and critical thinking, unlike the Victorian model, which limited personal growth. So, introduction. In the Victorian era, education was extremely strict and focused only on facts and disciplines. So children were expected to memorize and obey. So Charles Dickens shows this through Mr. Green in Hard Times, so who believes in facts and nothing but facts. So this presentation explore the journey from rigid facts to imaginative learning. So Victorian education, a rigid framework. So Victorian schools focused on memorization and strict disciplines. So children had little freedom to express themselves or to be creative. So Mr. Green is a perfect example of this approach, emphasizing facts above everything else, preparing children only for industrial work, not for life. So concept of childhood in the Victorian era. So children in Victorian times were seen as small adults. They were expected to follow rules and had no space for emotional growth or imagination. So childhood was about obedience and learning facts, not about joy or curiosity. So fact versus fancy in hard times. So here Charles Dickens contrasts facts and imaginations. Grant Green represents facts while C.C. Dupe represents fancy imagination, emotion and creativity. So Dickens shows that ignoring fancy makes education mechanical and dehumanized. So transition from Victorian to modern education. Over time, education began to include creativity and emotional well-being. Child psychology influenced teaching methods, and modern schools started to focus only on individual interests and holistic development rather than just rote memorization. So comparison of Victorian versus modern education. So uh, here I will compare Victorian and modern values. Victorian school stressed obedience and uniformity, while today's education values creativity, critical thinking, and personal growth. We aim to develop well-rounded individuals, not just scholars. So education today balancing facts and fancy. So modern education blends knowledge with imagination. For example, STEAM education combines science and arts. Students are encouraged to explore, create projects, and solve problem rather than just memorize facts. So, global reforms and modern policies. Globally, education has become more inclusive and flexible. Reforms like NEP 2020 in India promote skill-based learning, creativity, and life skills alongside academics. So, education is now more about preparing students for life, not just exams. So even today, Dickens critique matters. Education should not be just about facts. It should develop empathy, imagination, and facts, and empathy, imagination, and critical thinking. So modern educators can learn from his warning about mechanical, dehumanizing teaching. So, in conclusion, education has evolved from strict fact based learning to creative and holistic development. So, the best education balances knowledge with imagination. So, through literature like Dickens' Hard Times, we see the dangers of ignoring imagination and empathy in learning. So, modern reforms, inclusive policies, and innovative teaching method shows that true education balance facts with fancy. So preparing individuals not just for work but for life. So fostering curiosity, empathy, and problem solving skills essential for a rapidly changing world. So these are my learning outcomes. These are references. If you have any question, feel free to ask.
My question is, what improvements are still needed in today's education system?
In today's education system, still they give priority to marks, test or examination. So student study only for to get pass in examinations, to get marks, and for tests. They are not applying knowledge or understanding the concepts. So another one.
So my question to you is that what lessons can modern educators learn from the Victorian failures?
So, education should balance fact with imaginations. So the Victorian failures. So the lesson is that education should not produce only workers. Uh, they sh- uh, they should create thinkers, dreamers. So the Victorian failures reminds us that without imagination, education loses their soul. So this is from my side. Thank you so much.
Hello everyone, I'm audible. Good afternoon. Today's my presentation topic is the failure of fact, Dickens' humanist rebellion against rationalism. This is my academic details and presentation details. This is the table of content. My research questions is that how does Charles Dickens use hard times to show failure of logic and fact when they are not balanced with imaginations, emotions, and kindness? My hypothesis is that in hard times, Charles Dickens shows that society based only reason, logic, and industrial progress becomes cold and inhuman. He believes that imaginations, emotions, and compassions are necessary to make life meaningful and moral. My introductions in the 19th century England changed very quickly. New machines, factories, and idea made life fast and busy. Many people believe that logic, science, and numbers could solve all problems. This belief is called rationalism and utilitarianism. It means that only fact and result matters. Charles Dickens, one of the greatest Victorian writers, did not agree. In his novels Hard Times, 1854, he shows that a world that only cares about a fact forgets feelings, imaginations, and humanity. The characters Thomas Gradgrind says, now what I want is fact, which becomes a symbol of these times. Dickens uses this story to warn readers that life without love, kindnesses, and imaginations is empty and cold. Industrialisms and the lose of humanity. The story of hard times takes place in a city called Cocktowns. It is full of factors, smokes, and machines. The words are called the workers are called hands as they are not real people. Dickens use Cocktown to shows how industrial process makes people forget their emotions and humanity. Stephen Blackpool, one of the workers, lives a hard and lonely life. he is honest and kind, but suffers in a world that value and money more important than people. Dickens shows that when a reason and profit becomes more important than feelings, society becomes unfair and heartless. Educations and the failure of fact. Dickens also attacks that education system of this time. In great grand schools, children are told that imagination is unless and only facts matter. The students learn informations, but they do not learn how to feel or care for others. Louisa great grand grows up intelligent but unhappy because she cannot express love or joy. Sissy Jube on the other hand, learners from her circus families through stories, plays, and kindnesses. She is full of emotions and empathy. Dickens uses Sissy to show that imaginations and educations are just as important as logic and reasons. He believes that real educations should build both the mind and the heart. Fact and fantasy, the power of imaginations. The biggest idea in hard times is the fight between fact and fantasy. Facts stand for reasons, logics, and measurements. Fancy means imaginations, emotions, and moral feelings. Moral feeling. Dickens believes that fancy gives life, worth, and Dickens believes that fancy gives life, worth, creativity, and kindness. Sissy Jupe represent fancy. She helps other remember that importance of caring and dreaming. Dickens show that imaginations help people can connect with others and solves problems in a human way. Without imaginations, life becomes mechanical and sad. Dickens' humanist message. Dickens' rebellion against the world's of fact comes from his belief in humanism. Humanism means the belief in the value and dignity of every person. He thought that love, sympathy, and moral sense are the most important human qualities. Characters like Grants and Bounderby, who lives by reasons alone, end up lonely and empathy. Uh, thus, who lives with kindnesses and feeling like Sissy and Stephen show true strength. Dickens teaches that real progress must combine reason with emotions and knowledge with kindnesses. Without humanity, progress is meaningless. Why Dickens' message still matters today? Even even in our world today, Dickens' message is a very important. We live in a time of technology, data, and machines. Sometimes people care more about a result and information than about empathy or moral values. Dickens reminds us that progress is a good only when it helps people live better kind lives. His humanist idea that imaginations and compassions should guide logic and reasons can still teach us how to build a more caring and balanced society. Conclusion. Hard Times is than a story about a Victorian England. It is a lesson for every generation. Dickens shows that life without a feeling, imaginations, and kindness is a failure. Facts are useful, but they cannot guide the heart. Dickens' humanist rebellion reminds us that progress should never forget humanity. The novel teaches that only when we balance fact and feeling can we truly live meaningful and moral lives. This is my learning out comes from through the presentations. This is the reference. Thank you. If anyone any questions.
So, Sandhya, how does Dickens' message connect with social problems today?
So Dickens' message connect today's social problems. Many people face inequality, stress, and loneliness. Is Dickens' message tells us that society must care for people's heart, not only their works and or success.
So my question is, how does Dickens's message relate to modern education?
In a modern educations often focus on grades and result, just like great grants schools. uh, uh, Dickens message Dickens message that imaginations, creativity, and empathy are also important for a real learning. Thank you. This is from my side.
Good afternoon, everyone. My presentation topic is the world of hard times, morality, reform, and modern echoes. My personal information, academic information, table of contents, research question: how does Charles Dickens use the theme of an enclosure in hard times to critique Victorian, and how does this critique translate to modern educational experience? Hypothesis: Charles Dickens used physical and metaphysical 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 act of enclosure in education. The urban environment and social re- relation as his primary literary strategy to critique the dehumanizing effect. While this critique was aimed at Victorian society, its core argument remains wild. The novel's deception of an imagination-starved education system provides a durable framework for understanding and articulating a similar frustration within modern standards schooling as the evidence by the response of children in contemporary studies. Introduction. Charles Dickens' Hard Times stands uh, at the intersection of art and social criticism, revealing the dual identity of Dickens as both a novelist and reformer. As a storyteller, he created memorable characters and intricate plots that explore the human condition. As a social critic, he exposed the moral and emotional cost of industrialization, utilitarian education, and class inequality. This presentation examines the tension between these two roles, how Dickens' imaginative storytelling and his moral vision work together to challenge the mechanism, values of Victorian society and offer a timeless reflection on compassion, creativity, and human dignity. The two Dickens novelists versus reformer. Dickens, the novelist, master storyteller, how create vivid characters, complex plots, and powerful symbolism to explore the human condition. Dickens, the reformer, social critic, how use his fiction as a weapon to attack injustice, inequality, and the failures of his era institution. The politics of hard times, clash of vision, critic of system, becomes fiercely attacks the utilitarian uh, philosophy of fact, and the dehumanizing industrial capitalism of Cooktown, a lack of a clear alternative. Our Dickens, the novelist, is a spectacle of the organized working class as a force for positive change. The result, the novelist politics becomes became of became a moral critic rather than a practical program for reformer. The solution is present as a change of industrial individual art rather than systematic political change. Act of enclosure, the moral landscape, physical enclosure, the camp, factories, the smoky town, the rigid boundaries of stone lodge. These mirrors the confinement of the spirit. Mental molar enclosures, the grind system of education friends in the mind of children, shooting out imagination, wonder, and empathy. The circus as counterpoint, hilarious horse reading represent the very thing Cooktown's suppress fantasy, folly, and human connection is exit on the outside, both physically and philosophically. Children talk to Charles Dickens, contemporary dialogues. The method they engage with children in equalitative study using hard time as a starting point to discuss the children's own experience with property, education, and hardship. The findings. The children's story related that the green model of education is still alive, focusing on standardizing, testing, and rote memorizing at the expense of creativity. They articulate a clever understanding of social inequality and their place with it. A film unfilled interpretation of hard time. A political dilemma is caused by the moral unclose that identifies the system is so spiritually bankrupt that Dickens can only imagine escape or personal redemption, not political overhaul. The modern echoes found by show that the system Dickens critics have evolved but persist. The need for friendship for art, empathy, and qualitative understanding is urgent as ever. Core conflict. Utilitarianism, fact versus humanism, fancy played out in political, education, and human souls. Conclusion: hard times enduring because Dickens unities moral passion with artists, artist artistic imagination, while his novel short of proposing political revolution, it delivery at a powerful human message wearing against system that value fact or feeling and efficiency or empathy. The world of Cocktown may belong to machines and statistic, but Dickens insight that the art and imagination must prevail. His vision remains shrinkingly relevant today, reminding us that true reformer began not in institutions but in the awakening of compassion and the recover of our shared humanity. Learning outcome references. Thank you. Any question?
What political dilemma does identify hard times?
Dickens resolves the social conflict by showing the redemptive power of compassion, imagination, and moral responsibility. Suggestion social harmony comes from human condition rather than industrial or systems. Next.
So my questions to you, how does Dickens resolves the social conflict in the novel?
Dickens, the novel highlight the tension between industrial capitalism, human Dickens critic society that neglect works needs moral development. Thank you from my side.
So hello, good afternoon everyone. Myself KRUTIBEN and today I am going to present Reinforcing Victorian Marriage Norms in Hardy's Jude the Obscure. Here is my academic details with presentation details. This is a table of content which I will discuss today. So my research question is, how does Thomas Hardy's Jude the Obscure depict the tension between individual desires and Victorian societal expectation of marriage? And in what ways does the novel reinforce the prevailing marriage norms of this era? Hypothesis: in Jude the Obscure, Hardy portrays the tragic consequences of challenging Victorian marriage conventions, suggesting that individual desires are often suppressed by societal norms, thereby reinforcing the authority and rigidity of the Victorian marriage institution. Victorian marriage, a sordid legal and moral contract. Marriage as a mercenary institution. So, in Victorian society, marriage operated as a legal and economic transactions and property, inheritance, and respectability over affection or companionship. Here, Hardy exposed this hypocrisy in this Jude the Obscure, and he describing marriage as a sordid contract, legal entrapment through the Matrimonial Causes Act 1857. The Matrimonial Causes Act 1857 made divorce a civil matter but kept it financially prohibitive and morally especially for women. So here Hardy mirrors this rigidity through Jude's the forced marriage to Arabella, and it's symbolizing society power to override individual freedom. Religion and morality as a reinforcing agent. So the church upheld marriage as a sacred duty, linking moral virtue to marital obedience. So here Hardy critiques said this moral showing how religion and law together sustain patriarchal control and silence personal desires. The societal must, ideological conditioning. So the angel in the house idol. So Victorian women were conditioning to embody the angel in the house, pure, submissive, and devoted to domestic duty. But here Hardy subverted this idea through Arabella, who fulfill social norms outwardly but lacks emotional depth or spiritual connection. Second one, Hardy's critique of moral conformity. So he reveals that the societal must, the expectation to conform, suppress individuality and happiness. By portraying this character who challenge these norms, Hardy here exposes the psychological cost of conformity. Marriage as the measure of respectability. So Hardy here exposes how this ideological pressure forces conformity, especially among the working class, where marriage ensured economic survival and social approval. Jude's first failure, Arabella and obligation. So Jude's intellectual dream crushed by domestic obligation. And as we know that Victorian society pressure men and women to conform and punishing deviation. And here marriage depicted as a trap for emotional and intellectual freedom. So here Hardy critiques the tension between individual aspiration and societal duty. Shiv Bride had the spirit of comradeship. Sue is Jude's intellectual and emotional equal, sharing his ideas and aspiration, and her choice highlights the conflict between personal desires as well as Victorian societal norms. And here Hardy embodies the new woman and seeking autonomy, equality, and personal freedom. Central conflict between contrast versus comradeship. So here Jude and Sue reject formal marriage and seeking a partnership based on equality. So here central tension in this novel, love and personal desire versus law and societal expectation. So the couple struggle highlights here how societal enforcement suppresses emotional freedom, challenging the norms, social backlash. So here marriage act as a moral and social weapon and enforcing conformity and suppressing rebellion. So the Hardy portrays here social pressure as a force that crushes personal desires, social ostracism and as a repression. So in Jude the Obscure, Jude and Sue are forced into exile as a result of social condemnation, reflecting the harsh consequences of defying Victorian norms. And here society actively silence alternative models of love and companionship. So here showing how collisions between individual desires and societal enforcement lead to inevitable tragedy. So the tragic climax, little father time, done because we are too many. Here this quotation highlights the internalized social guilt. So in Jude the Obscure, the children's murder, suicide represents society moral judgment on those who defy conventional marriage and social norm. So this tragedy underscores the fatal consequences of rejecting Victorian expectation. And also here Hardy critiques that a system that prioritizes conformity over personal happiness, and it also exposing the oppressive rigidity of Victorian moral as well as legal codes. So mechanism of reinforcement. So here Hardy demonstrate a cyclical mechanism in which rebellion leads to tragedy, which in turn reinforce societal norms. So here Hardy also critiques the oppressive nature of Victorian institution. The narrative outcomes ultimately uphold the very norms, and he also criticized showing that deviation from social rules carries severe and often fatal consequences. This mechanism highlights the tragic power of societal structure to suppress individuality and enforce conformity. The final capitulation, Sue's return. Sue remarries Philorson under the weight of guilt, and the new woman is defeated by societal and moral pressure. So here Hardy shows how even independent as well as intellectual women can't escape Victorian expectation and reinforce the dominance of rigid social and marital norms. So tragic consolidation. So here Jude's death served to complete the process of social correction, illustrating how society eliminates those who challenge its norm. So here the conclusion underscores the paradox of Hardy's work, exposing flaws in social structure while depicting their unyielding power. So here conclusion and a hypothesis proved that Hardy's Jude the Obscure shows that how Victorian marriage norms suppress personal desire and comradeship. So here Jude and Sue's rebellion leads to ostracism, exile, and tragedy, while symbolic events like Little Father's time's death and Sue's capitulation reinforce societal rules. Though Hardy here critiques oppression as well as the novel, this novel paradoxically restores social orders. And my hypothesis is proven because every time they choose their own desire, they get hit within insane amount of tragic punishment. They lose their social standing and they are treating like criminals, and their children die, and here Sue completely break down. So therefore the tragic outcome actually reinforces the rigid marriage norms, just like my hypothesis says. So this is my learning outcomes. I have learned to clearly identify and articulate the intense tension in the novel between the characters' individual desires and the rigid expectation of Victorian marriage laws. So this is the key points throughout my presentation, which you help to. These are my references. So thank you. Questions are welcome, please.
My question is, can hardy critique of marriage in Jude Oscar be read as a rebellion against both Christian morality and capitalist social order?
Yes. So in the Jude the Obscure, Hardy portrays marriage as a prison of both faith and social ambition. So rebelling against Christian morality and the capitalist order by showing how love is defined by rigid rules and material concern. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is HELAIYA. Today, I am going to present my topic Shoe Bridehead, the new woman in Thomas Hardy's Jude the Obscure. This is my academic information. This is table of contents. My research question is, how does Thomas Hardy portray Shoe Bridehead as a representation of the new woman, and in what ways does her character challenge the social, moral, and gender conventions of Victorian society? Hypothesis: Shoe Bridehead embodies the ideals of the new woman through her intellectual independence, rejection of traditional marriage, and resistance to patriarchal and religious constraints. Hardy uses her character to critique the restrictive social norms of Victorian England and to highlight the struggles faced by women seeking personal freedom and equality. Introduction: Jude the Obscure is novel by Thomas Hardy that explores the strict rules and expectations of Victorian society. The story focuses on themes like societal pressures, morality, and the limited roles available for men and women. Shoe Bridehead, one of the main characters, represents the idea of new woman, a woman who is educated, independent, and question traditional gender roles. Unlike many women of her time, she wants freedom to make her own choices and challenges society's expectations of marriage, religion, and behavior. Shoe Bridehead as the new woman. Here, the new woman means modern woman who wants freedom, education, and equality. She doesn't follow the old rules and traditions about marriage and society. She shows intellectual independence and the courage to think for herself. Instead of following society's expectations, she questions moral and social norms, refusing to accept the limits placed on women in Victorian society. She rejects traditional marriage, believing love should be based on emotional and intellectual understanding, not beauty. She criticizes religion for its control over women and its rigid moral codes. By choosing her own path despite criticism, Shu becomes a symbol of rebellion, strength, and female independence. Psychological complexity faces internal conflict between her personal desires and societal expectations, often feelings torn between love, duty, and social rules. Shows emotional depth, including anxiety, guilt, and moral dilemmas, reflecting the pressures of living in a rigid society. Illustrates the challenges of being an independent woman in Victorian England, highlighting how society restricts women's freedom and self expression. Reveals how Hardy portrays the psychological struggles of women who try to balance personal belief with societal norms. Shu and societal critique. Hardy critiques Victorian moral codes through Shu's non-conformity, showing how rigid rules limit individuality. Highlights the conflict between personal freedom and societal expectation as Shu struggles to live according to her beliefs. Shows the restriction on women's choices, emphasizing the challenges independent women face in a patriarchal society. Reveals Hardy's critical view of gender inequality, using Shu's life to question traditional roles and social norms. Themes of gender and identity. Shu questions traditional femininity and challenges the expected roles of women in Victorian society. Represents the conflict between modern ideas and traditional values, showing the tension of changing social norms. Highlights the moral and societal consequences faced by women who defy social expectations. Illustrates Hardy's explorations of gender inequality and the limitations imposed on the independent women. Reader and critical response. Female readers see Shu either as a feminist icon or a tragic figure, reflecting her complex character. Reader response theory shows how different audiences interpret Shu's morality, independence, and actions. Highlights the difference between Hardy's intention and reader interpretations, emphasizing how Shu's character can be understood in multiple ways. Demonstrate the ongoing debate about Shu's role as a symbol of the new woman and her societal impact. Moral and ethical ambiguity. Shu's actions are sometimes seen as selfish or manipulative, showing her complex personality. Highlights questions about gender expectations and how society judges women differently from men. Shows Shu's personal struggle for autonomy, balancing her desires with societal pressures. Hardy's narrative encourages reader to reflect critically on morality, social norms, and the consequences of non-conformity. Conclusion. Shu Bridehead in the Jude the Obscure represents the new woman of Victorian society, progressive, independent, and morally conscious. Through her character, Hardy critiques the rigid social and moral codes of the time, exposing the inequalities and limitations imposed on women. Shu's struggles highlights the tension between personal freedom and societal expectations, making her powerful symbol for understanding feminist ideals and the challenges faced by women who defy traditional norms. Her experiences remain relevant today as they continue to provoke reflection on gender roles, autonomy, and social justice. These are the references. Thank you. Now, questions are welcome.
So my question is that how does Hardy shows the limits of female freedom through Sue?
Hardy shows that Shu's freedom is limited by society's rules and judgment. No matter how smart and strong she is, people don't let her live freely in the Victorian society.
My question is, why do readers sometimes find so confusing or contradictory?
Because she is realistic, full of emotions and conflicts. She wants freedom but also love and acceptance. Hardy made her complex like real human beings. That's all from my side. Thank you.
So, hello everyone. My name is Priyanka Nakrani, and today I'm going to present Jude the Outsider, alienation, and the anti-hero in Hardy's final novel. This is my academic and presentation details, and this is table of content. Let's begin with introduction. So, as we know that published in 1895, Thomas Hardy's final novel, condemned as a immoral for challenging Victorian norms on marriage, class, and religion, publicly banned by critics. The protagonist is Jude, a working class orphan in rural Mary Green, self-educated, dreams of study at Christminster and becoming a clergyman. The key theme is alienation from society, class inequality, critique of rigid institutes like marriage, church, and university, and the futility of personal ambition in the deterministic world. The context of tragic anti-Brighams man, unlike traditional novels of growth, Jude's aspirations for knowledge and love leads to despair and death at age of 30. So my research question is, how does Thomas Hardy use Jude folly as a alienation and anti-heroic traits in Jude the Obscure to critique Victorian social conventions as a foreshadow modernist theme of isolation? So my hypothesis is Thomas Hardy portrays Jude Folly as a alienated anti-hero in Jude the Obscure, whose rejections by society and personal failure critic Victorian constraints prefigure modernist existential isolation. Let's focus on Jude as a anti-hero. Anti-hero defied feud, relatable and protagonist, driven by desire and not noble ideas. Jude as a treat, ambition and self-educated but impulsive and morally conflicted. Like example of dreams of Christminster but rejected due to class. Love for few bridehead, unmined clerical ambitions. So significance is failure critic Victorian barriers. Let's focus on alienation in Jude's word. Firstly, we have to know that what is alienation, feeling isolated, disconnected, or rejected by society. Jude's struggle described that Jude's folly dreams of education and a better life but faces barrier like social class barrier, relationship barrier, dreams vs reality. And the key example of that, Jude's rejection from Christminster symbolized society's refusal to accept outsiders. Why it matters? Because alienation shows how society can trap individuals, making Jude a relatable tragic figure. Let's focus on existentialist theme. What is existentialist theme? Firstly, we have to know that how it's about big question like questioning about life, life's purpose, freedom, and individual responsibilities. Jude's as an existential struggle questions life, fairness, why do his dream of education and love fail? Example like rejected by Christ minister, Jude feels like lacks meaning, faces despair after tragedies. The key theme is isolation, freedom vs fate and absurdity. Hardy's philosophy described that challenges Victorian optimism, showing a world where dreams clash with harsh realities. Modernism and social critic. Modernism, in modernism, Jude the Obscure blends Victorian realism with proto-modernist disillusionment using fragmented ideals and psychological depth anticipates Jude's stream of consciousness. Social critique is that challenges marriage, class, and religion. Jude's rejection by Christ minister exposes elitism, critique Victorian hypocrisy, ensue resistance to remarriage. Alienation is Jude, a working class dreamer, faces isolation from society and self, reflecting modernist despair. His exile in Christ minister deepen existential solitude. The anti-hero theme is that Jude's flawed possessive struggle against societal barrier marks him as an anti-hero. Unlike tradition Victor's, his death is obscurity, rejects heroic attempt. So let's compare Jude is what kind of outsider. So first, Frankenstein, their core alienation is hubris. That it's hubris means someone tries to control on like creating life and death, and what they wanted they wanted that knowledge and glory. Why Jude is different from the Frankenstein? Jude is punished from modesty and simple learning, not for ambition. So Heathcliff is their core alienation is obsession with love, and Heathcliff wanted a revenge. What they wanted is revenge, and Catherine. Why Jude is different from Heathcliff? Jude is driven by aspiration and earnestness, not restricting rage. Measure their call alienation is emotion, existential empathy, and what they wanted nothing but acceptance. Jude's different from mere salt. Jude is an outsider of pain and desire, not detachment or philosophical choice. So my conclusion and legacy of Jude the outsider is Jude dies alone in 1895, crushed by societal barrier and rigid moral codes. His words, "The dead don't care, I am beyond caring," reflect his profound alienation. Hardy's critic, society and punished modest ambition, sincere love, and the pursuit of knowledge, making Jude a tragic anti-hero. The legacy is proto-modernist pioneer, influencing Lawrence class theme and the Woolf narrative style. Burned by Bishop by 1896 for radical views. Modern reflection is on August 8, 2025, resonates with 2025 education equality debates and social exclusive issues. Hardy's response is Hardy left the writing novel for poetry, publishing Wessex poem after Blackish. And this is my learning outcome. Let how I understand, and my presentation is about proto-modernist element, Hardy blend Victorian realism with themes of disillusionment, fragmented ideals, and philosophical depth in Jude the Obscure, and how they social critique on Jude the Obscure. Alienation in Jude Folly, a working class dreamer faces social and self-isolation, rejecting borders, modernist despair, and existential theme. Anti-hero, Jude is portrayed as a flawed, passive and defected by social barriers and constructive with tradition and Victorian heroic ideals. And contemporary application is themes of Jude's alienation resonate today with issue like education inequality, social exclusive. These are my references, and if you have any question, feel free to ask.
So my question is to you, Priyanka. How does Hardy's portrayal of Jude as an anti-hero reflect the struggle of modern individual in today's society, especially in the context of alienation and individualism?
Okay. Like Jude is an anti-hero because he tried hard to reach his dream but always failed. He is not perfect. He makes mistakes, feel lonely and doesn't fit in. Just like many people today, Jude feels lost in worlds that doesn't understand him. For example, people today also work hard for success but face rejection or pressure from society. Jude's loneliness and dreams to be accepted shows how many modern people feel disconnected and struggle to find their place in world. If you have another question. It's okay.
My question is, how can Jude's sense of alienation and frustration in Jude the Obscure be seen as a response to contemporary issues like economic inequality, lack of opportunity, or social struggle?
Okay. Jude feels left out because he wants to study and move up in life, but society blocks him. This is like people today who want a good education or jobs but can't get them because they are poor or from wrong background. For example, many students today can't afford college or don't get fair chance. Jude Payne shows how unfair systems stop people from improving their lives, just like what happened in modern world with economic inequality and lack of opportunity. So this is from my side. Thank you, everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sagar Chawda. My presentation topic for today is Thomas Hardy's Poetry and Philosophy, a Critical Study. These are my academic and presentation details. This is the table of contents. My research question is, how did Thomas Hardy, following His withdrawal from novel writing forged a unique poetic identity through a complex engagement with the philosophy of determinism, the theme of temporal mutability, and a difficult search for an authentic personal voice. My hypothesis is Hardy's poetry represents a deliberate artistic and philosophical project. By taking a full look at the worst, he developed a poetic grounded in the relentless paces of time. His greatest poems succeeded when he abandoned ironic masks and embraces a direct, personal voice, thereby transforming a philosophy of pessimism into a profound art of loving kindness and a fellow feeling. Introduction: The return of the native poet. Just as Carter and Mack says that few poets better convey the uneasy transition from Victorianism to modernism than Thomas Hardy. So in 18, after much hostile reception of Jude the Oscar in 1895, Thomas Hardy devoted himself only to poetry, short story, and dramatic verses, and that's why he can be seen as a bridge from Victorianism to modernism. Freed from the commercial pressure of fiction, Hardy's poetry became the culmination of his life's work, where the great themes of his novels, fate, chance, and human struggle, are distilled into their most potent and personal form. We will explore how this transition allowed Hardy to develop a poetic defined by a stark philosophical honesty, a profound obsession with time, and a courageous search for a deeply authentic and empathetic voice. Hardy on his art, a poetry of impressions, a rejection of system. Hardy explicitly stated in the apology to his collection, late lyrics and earlier, that his poems were not intended to be a coherent philosophical system. He described his verses as a series of unadjusted impressions, each one an honest response to a particular moment of feeling. His goal for this was the ultimate aim of his poetry was, as he saw it, was not to prove a bleak worldview, but to awaken a sense of empathy. The purpose of taking a full look at the worst was to find a path towards loving kindness and a fellow feeling by recognizing the shared human struggle against an indifferent universe. Hardy was aware that his poetic style was often seen as crazy and awkward. This was a deliberate choice. He rejected smooth, conventional Victorian poetics in favor of a style that could more accurately reflect the dissonant and often jarring nature of modern experience and memory. The philosophical core, a full look at the worst. At the heart of Hardy's poetry is a deterministic worldview. This philosophy posits an immanent will or a prime mover. These are two main themes or philosophical ideas of Thomas Hardy's poetry. That it is a blend, unconscious force that governs the universe without reason or compassion, weaving human lives into patterns of suffering by chance. Hardy believed it was the artist's duty to confront this harsh reality without flinching. His poetry insists that humanity must take a full look at the worst to find any meaningful path forward, refusing the comfort of sentimental illusions. In this framework, humanity is a fleeting, petite, tragic thing, a brief flicker of consciousness in a vast, indifferent cosmos. Our capacity for love and memory is both our glory and the source for our deepest pain. The tyranny of time, mutability, and the past. The single most dominant theme of all Hardy's poetry is time and mutability. His work is a sustained meditation on the destructive power of time and its tragic consequences of human love, memory, and identity. The past in Hardy's poetry is rarely a source of comfort. Instead, memory becomes a form of inner haunting, where moments of past joy return only to emphasize the pain of present loss. The past is a ghost that can never be fully exorcised. The then, which is now dynamic, many of his most powerful lyrics are structured around a stark contrast between a vibrant then and a desolate now. This structure highlights the irreversible and often cruel changes wrought by time, making loss the central human experience. A poetics of time, form, meter, and memory. Irregular, crazy meters, just as many critics described his poetry. In thematic function, Hardy often breaks from smooth conventional rhythms. This creates a jarring, awkward music that mirrors the unpredictable and often harsh nature of life and the disjointed experience of memory. The prime example of it could be The Darkling Thrush, published in 31st December 1900. Complex stanza form. He frequently invented intricate and unusual stanza patterns. These complex structures can act as containers for chaotic emotions, suggesting an attempt to impose order on the painful randomness of memory and time. In poetic techniques, use of dialect and old words, just as he does in his poem Friends Beyond. Repetition and refrain. The use of refrains and repetition phrase from mimic the act of obsessive memory, where a particular world of image returns again and again, like a ghost that cannot be laid to rest. The prime example could be During Wind and Rain. The search for an authentic voice. A central struggle in Hardy's poetry is the search for an authentic voice. In many poems, he hides behind the mask of a persona or a cynical, ironic tone, which serves to distance him from his own feelings. This irony often functions as a defense mechanism, a shield or an escape from the direct and painful expression of emotion. When this ironic voice dominates, the poem can feel bitter, dishonest, and emotionally hollow. Honesty and artifice. The search for an authentic voice represents a deep commitment to honesty. For his poetry to achieve its goal of fellow feeling, it had to be grounded in a simple but profoundly honest expression of thought and feelings. A case study in voice, irony versus metaphor. The voice of irony is the weaker poetry, and the voice of metaphor, the great poetry. The hope in the gloom, a reassessment beyond simple pessimism. While Hardy's philosophy is undeniably bleak, it is critical misreading to label him as a simple pessimist, just as we do in with his novels. His work is not a celebration of despair, but a courageous confrontation with it. The Darkling Thrush is a test case. This poem perfectly illustrates the concept. Amid a desolate, wraith-like winter landscape, a frail thrush suddenly sings a song of ecstatic sound. The speaker can see no rational cause for this joy, yet the song itself exists as an undeniable fact. For the conclusion, Thomas Hardy wrote more than 900 poems, and he was a kind of the poet reborn, because the end of his novel writing career was not a failure but a rebirth, allowing Thomas Hardy to find his truest and most powerful medium in poetry. His poetry endures because of his unflinching honesty. It confronts a deterministic philosophy and a relentless passage of time, refusing easy answers in favor of unadjusted impressions. For my learning outcomes, I came to know from this presentation that Hardy did not write only novels, but he also ventured into another fields such as lyric poetry, and this is the full dimension of his literary career. These are my references. Thank you. If anyone has any question.
So, Sagar, I want to ask that beyond the novel and lyric poetry, did Thomas Hardy's literary output extend to other genres?
As we know, Thomas Hardy is majorly famous for his novels, and in this presentation we discussed about his poetry as well. And apart from poetry and novels, Hardy ventured into the field of verse drama as well. In the first decade of the 20th century, he published the Dynards in 3 parts, and apart from that, the exploration of his fictional town, the Wessex, was left after novels, but he did continue with exploring his fictional town Wessex by publishing short stories as well. That includes Wessex Tales and Life's Little Ironies. Any other question, please?
What event caused Thomas Hardy to stop writing novels and return to poetry?
As you know, Thomas Hardy was a kind of pessimistic writer, and in his novel, and especially in his last novel, Jude, it was received by the audience so hostilely, so that he did not continue with writing novels, and started rewriting poetry. That is, before writing novel, he was writing poetry, and after the much hostile reception of his novels, he started writing poetry again. Thank you, everyone.
So good afternoon everyone. My name is Priya Rathod, and today I am going to discuss about psychological depth and human motivation in Robert Browning's dramatic monologues. So these are my academics details and presentation details. This is table of contents. So my research question is, how does Robert Browning use the dramatic monologue form to reveal the psychological depth and underlying human motivations of his speakers? Hypothesis: Browning's dramatic monologues function as a psychological case studies in verse, where the speaker's self-justifying rhetoric unintentionally exposes their subconscious motives such as ego, insecurity, obsession, and the desire for control. Through this form, Browning anticipates modern psychoanalytic methods by transforming poetic narration into a process of self-revelation and self-revelation and moral introspection. So let's begin with introduction. Browning's dramatic monologue is a psychological portrait of in verse, giving readers close access to the speaker's thought. It combines three key elements: speaker and implied listener, and character revelation, creating a scene of unintentional self-disclosure. The speaker unconsciously reveals inner conflicts, offering a psychoanalytic view of their mind. Motivation is enacted, not explained, showing desires, fears, and flaws through selective rhetoric. The mask of the mind is central, as the speaker projects a controlled persona, while the hidden motives leak through. Browning often chooses a moral, ambiguous, or villainous characters to explore human darkness. This form anticipates modern psychoanalysis, showing how subconscious
unconscious motivation conflict with conscious intent. It highlights how people present a facet with revealing their true selves inadvertently, exploring obsession, control, and moral ambiguity. Context: Victorian anxiety and the inner life. Browning's monologues offered a vital space to explore the era's spiritual and psychological uncertainty. By isolating the voice, he revealed the human mind wrestling with its own motives, divorced from the easy moralizing. This shift from public action to private thought, from character in action to action in character, was a revolutionary step toward a modern literary psychology. Uh, Motivation in My Last Duchess, The Cult of Control. The Dukes in the work My Last Duchess by Robert Browning, the Duke's motivation is fundamentally about maintaining status and power. He couldn't bear the Duchess's innocent equality of spirit, which he saw devaluing his ancient name. Killing her was his twisted way of resolving an internal conflict, turning a living complex woman into a permanent silent possession. This obsessive need for control remains relevant in relationships today. Psychological depth: The Duke's self-disclosure. The psychological depth of the Duke emerges in his rhetorical gaps. He is not simply describing a portrait, he is performing the superiority while desperately trying to justify his crime. His focus on material possessions from the bronze statue to the dowry confirms that his deepest motivation is materialistic pride, not emotional hurt, revealing chilling pathology. This picture symbolizes that a human mind is complex and layered. This picture is also represent the psychological depth and human motivation in Robert Browning's work My Last Duchess. Motivation in Porphyria's lover, the obsession with perfection. The lover's motivation is intensely psychological. He cannot accept Porphyria's transient, flawed human love. To secure her love forever, he commits a monstrous act, believing he is preserving her purity. This study of delusional thinking, which prioritize perfect movement over a living person, remains a powerful warning about the psychotic nature of possessive love. Psychological depth: Rationalizing the irreversible act. Uh, the true psychological depth here is the speaker's profound lack of guilt. He describes struggling her with the same calm precision he described her lighting the fire. His conviction that God has not said a word is the horrifying culmination of the self-deception, showing how far the human mind can travel into its own darkness when motivated by a possessive delusion. Invisible audience and the self-justifying voice. The presence of the silent listener is the stroke of psychological genius. The speaker is compelled to speak, which exposes his inner motive. His self-justification is forced into the open. The envoy's silence in My Last Duchess emphasizes the Duke's isolation, where his power has created a world of monologues, not dialogues, reflecting a common pitfall of unchecked authority. the core motivation, ego and insecurity. The central psychological lesson is that destructive motivation stems from deep insecurity. Both the duke and the lover must inhale the external challenge to their self perception, whether it's a smile or a social tie. This reinforces the tragic idea that those who crave total control are often the most psychologically fragile, destroying others to stabilize their own fractured egos. Conclusion, to conclude, we can say that Browning's works challenges us to be active spectacle readers. The psychological depth of his characters lies in the gap between their public performance and their private, often heinous motivation. This model of critical listening in his lasting legacy, training us to discern the truth hidden beneath any powerful self-justifying narrative, making this Victorian text timeless. Justification of the hypothesis. This hypothesis is robust because the dramatic monologue's formal constraint transform the poem into a psychological trap for the speaker. By focusing entirely on a self-justifying argument delivered to a silent audience, the speaker's conscious effort to maintain a facade, for example, the duke's calm superiority or the lover's pure motive, is constantly undermined. The reader, serving as the analyst, is able to detect the unintentional slips which function as a textual evidence to expose the underlying subconscious motives, the insecurity, ego, and pathological desires for control. Thus, the monologue inherently becomes a case study where the character reveals their true flawed nature not through the poet but in spite of their own narrative intent. These are my learning outcomes. These are references. These are key points throughout the presentation. And thank you. If anyone has any question, they are free to ask.
My question is, what might Browning's mask of the mind symbolize in a modern context?
So, in today's world, Browning's The Mask of the Mind symbolizes the carefully constructed identities of people present online or in society. Social media personas, professional facets, emotional filters that hide insecurity or moral conflict. It reflects how individuals still conceal their true motives behind curated appearances of confidence or virtue. Any other question?
So my question is, how do Browning's insights help in understanding manipulation today?
So Browning's poems show how people use charm, words, or appearances to hide their true intentions. By studying characters like the Duke or Porphyria's lover, we see how manipulation works, making others act or think a certain way while serving the manipulators' ego or desire. This helps us to recognize similar tactics in modern life, like in politics, advertising, as well as personal relationships. Thank you. This is from my side. Hello everyone, myself Nidhi Pandya. I am here to represent my presentation topic on the moral dilemmas in Ibsen and their resonance in today's ethical debates. These are my academic details and the presentation details. These are table of content which I will be telling about in the following. Now, research question and hypothesis. So, my research question upon this presentation is very unique. To what extent does Ibsen dramatization of the interpersonal moral conflicts in a doll's house, an enemy of the people, and a ghost establish the individual's duty to himself as a foundational ethical mandate, thereby functioning as a critique of the communicatarian model that prioritize social stability over the autonomy and the accountability. Now, the hypothesis, the universal structure conflict in Ibsen's plays demonstrate that the modern ethics crisis, such as the corporate whistleblowing from the Stockman's idea and the pursuit of the self-sovereignty by the Nora, are direct, predictable, and the manifestation of the life lie he dramatized, confirming that the transcendence of his moral critique. So, the introduction, the moral incompleteness of the morality, the shift from the realism to the transform into the stage into the ethical laboratory, confirming the immediate and the complex social problems within the framework. Ibsen's moral universe is defined by the interpersonal moral conflicts, where the duties are both compelling and the mutually exclusive. His dramas challenge that the authority of the compact majority and the questions the wisdom of relying on the general bank and the capital of nations by the presenting the tragic difficulty of moral choices and rejecting the simple resolution. Ibsen creates the essential tension that seeks to research to the analyze. Now, this would be the introduction. Now, the context, the ethical mandate for the self-truth. The doctrine of the self-realization drives Ibsen's central characters, like the asserting that the individual has an ethical duty to himself, and now to develop and actualize their potential, often chasing with the traditional family and the social roles. They are both trapped into between them. Critics like the Herbert Stewart condemned it as a dangerous ethical quackery for challenging the reliance on the collective moral wisdom, the general bank and the capital of the nation. Now, the Ibsen shows that this pursuit of the authentic selfhood is often tragic and isolating. The protagonist may perish in their attempts, yet proceed, providing that the self-made law is the highest ethical calling. Now, his work, which is very famous, A Doll's House in 1879, Nora's impossible choice. That how can she make that choice in that time? A Doll's House presents the classical Ibsen dilemma framed by the gender roles. Nora's initially forgery meant to save her husband's life, yet seemed morally corrupted and justified, yet Torvald's reaction was different, and a performance with her mere doll wife. This creates a moral conflict between her duty as a mother and a wife and a daughter, and her duty herself, the need for her authentic selfhood. Now, her final exit the Jerusalem was the first one, is not selfish one, but the ethical choice of her to perform which duty, ethically compelling the discumbered self. Now, the rejecting and unjust and the suffocating structure. A Doll's House, the uncumbered self debate. Now, the Nora's departure sparked the debate over the whether she embodies the uncumbered self, a liberal individualist who abandons all the anti-decent and moral or civil ties. Communicators think that, like Michael Sandel, use her critique that individualists discard these social roles. A more nuanced view sees her as an ethically compelling, discumbered self, rejecting only unjust and unequal thoughts and obligation within her marriage. Ibsen shows that when a social institution is broken, we have to spoke against it. Now, the ghost, the tyranny of the past, an enemy. Now, the tyranny of the ghost says that the ghost is a perhaps Ibsen's the most critical drama in which he has critiqued the moral expediency. Mrs. Elving maintains the facade for her marriage life, believing this social life feels her duty to family reputation, but the consequences are the catastrophical. The suppressed moral truth, the ghost of her husband, debauchery, manifests as an incurable disease to her son, Oswald. The play shows that the social hypocrisy is a moral content that poisons the next generation, which will be seen again after my slides. After that, The Enemy of the People, 1882, Truth versus the Public Health. An Enemy of the People presents a moral combat between the scientific integrity and the financial expediency. Dr. Thomas Stockman discovers that the town's public baths are condemned and creates an irresolvable dilemma. His brother, the mayor himself, invokes his duty to protect the economy and the general bank. But while he is doing that, he upholds that position that Stockman says that absolute mandate of the truth. The play shows that the compact majority is easily swayed by the Stockman's isolation. His decision to stand alone as an enemy of the people is the most powerful thing he has shown into the drama. Now, The Enemy of the People, the moral combat. Now, the Ibsen transfiers the Stockman's dilemma by bringing the moral combat into his home. Catherine, his wife, appeals to his fundamental duty as a father to provide for her and his family. Now, creating a true interpersonal conflict between the family and the obligation he has to perform into the society also. Now, it confirms that the tragic necessity of the individualistic hypothesis. He must stand alone because social structure failed to allow both honesty and the familial due to coexist. Now, this is the quote from the An Enemy of the People. The most dangerous foe or to truth and the freedom in our midst is the compact of majority. Now, the Ibsen and the fatherhood, ethical accountability. Scholarship shows that the fatherhood is a central theme in Ibsen, offering a sense and lens to the critique of the society's moral failures. Figures like the Captain Elving and Tolvar Helmer are just not just personality flawed by the embody and just giving the depth and disease, but they are the failure of the paternity. Now, the living on inheritance of the inequity, disease, debt, and the dependency, the system allows them to cling to life, and that is what happens when the social morals are corrupted. And this critique remains relevant today, highlighting the long-term cause of the systematic failures, from integration to debt to the climate responsibility passed away down by those in power. Now, the Ibsen legacy due to the question. Ibsen's ultimate legacy in his commitment to radical moral inquiry, that earning him as the level of negativism. Critics, especially like the theologians, were frustrated by his refusal to offer a gospel. That what he wants to say, he just give us a complex situation. He just to quench. He said to just question, not to answer. And by the ending of his plays, The Crisis Without the Neat Conclusion, he shifts moral responsibility to the audience by the forcing of the dilemma. And true moral maturity, he shows, lies in the challenging the compact majority, and by the continually questioning establish the social truth, that where is the truth. Now, the ethical resonance today is the autonomy and the accountability. Ibsen's drama provide us a key to models analyzing the modern ethical failures by the Nora and the Torvald and the every person into his drama, showing how the moral person who are always moral but gets the standing alone at the end. Now, the conclusion for the enduring challenge, that in conclusion, Ibsen's achievement lies in his mastery of irresolvable moral conflict. His plays reject the notion that a simple universal moral code can resolve modern social complexity. The ethical mandate he lives in is to not to seek compromise but to accept the tragic difficulty of choosing one valid duty over the another, often prioritizing the self-realization over the institution stability. And this was the someone must have to courage to stand alone with the uncomfortable truth and embrace the role of perpetual questioner. Justification of the hypothesis. My question is the justified that the hypothesis is grounded in Ibsen's refusal to provide redemption or the atonement, as his artistic vocation is to question, not just to answer. His play contradicts and constructs the ethical framework defined by the interpersonal moral conflicts, where the duties are compelling and the mutual excessive. Now, within this structure, characters are often forced to choose between the two duties, which are role-related obligation or the pursuing of the duty himself. The research therefore examines how the Ibsen positioned individual conscious against the communicationers and the demands which depend on the general bank and the capital of nation. Ultimately, the justification for the prioritizing the autonomy lies in the tragic exposure of the society's failure to sustain ethical self-realization. These are my learning outcomes from the Ibsen's drama, that how he mirrors the human consciousness and the society, and the how person who follows the truth are always standing alone at the end, and they have to face the two choices always, how to choose their family or to choose their society, which one is true or which one is false. These are the key points throughout my presentation, and these are the reference I have taken for my presentation. Thank you, everyone. If anyone have question, they can ask.
So my question is, what if Ibsen were here to observe social media platforms where misinformation spreads faster than facts?
So the Ibsen would likely to view this as a modern manifestation of a compact majority, as a moral failure. He would say that you just have to go into the deep work and the truth. Even if you are alone at the end, you must take the responsibility, because someone has to take the responsibility to tell the truth when everyone is following the false. And that is what the Stockman has stood alone into his drama also against the town, which shows that modern individuals and journalists must prioritize the integrity first over the popularity, and we should also do that first also. And that is because of that the long term social consequences are the bad ones. That is why we should follow the truth. Any other question?
My question is, can Ibsen's critique of social expediency inform debates on Godi media supporting powerful elites at the cost of public accountability?
Yes, his work highlights the ethical dangers of the prioritizing the institutional or the political interest over the truth, because in now era the journalists and our media are only everywhere following the politics and everyone, but do not just accept that what is the reality. When sir also shows us video that where they are not able to contain that truth, that is why they are just following the false, and they want everyone to follow the false one. That is why this Ibsen's moral dilemma and our social media are so much connected, that we should Ibsen, if would have been here, that he would have died. Thank you, everyone.
Uh, Good evening, everybody. Myself, Mulraj Gohil, and today my presentation topic is hard times and the Dickens concept of imagination. This is my academic information. This is a table of content. Research question of this particular presentation: how does Charles Dickens' hard times critique the utilitarian philosophy of fact and argue for the necessity of fancy as a foundation for the empathy, moral fulfillment, and true humanity? Hypothesis: the presentation hypothesizes that the Dickens uses the moral and psychological devastation of characters raised under the utilitarian system, like Louisa Grandgrain, to prove that a society built solely on logic and a measurable fact is dehumanizing and incomplete. Therefore, The novel asserts that the imagination and fancy are the essential moral medium required to temper reason and prevent it from becoming grim, idle, cruel, and cold. Introduction. Charles Dickens' Hard Times, 1854, is set against a backdrop of industrial revolution, a period when the society was driven by machinery, profit, and productivity. The age was marked by an obsession with facts, statistics, and measurable efficiency, often at the cost of the human emotions and creativity. By exposing this dehumanizing system, Dickens critiqued the social philosophy of the utilitarianism, which values practically and profit over compassion and individuality. He argues that a society built only on logic, numbers, losses, touch with the very qualities that make us human. In this sense, hard times become a defense of the human spirit, celebrating imagination, empathy, and moral feelings as a forces that resist the mechanization and restore balance to human life. Uh, on this slide, you show the part of conversation between Louisa and his father, Mr. Thomas. This particular part of the present conversation is related to Dickens' concept of the imagination, because Louisa, raised by his father in environment of fact, logic, and utility, completely neglecting emotions and moral growth. And these lines showing us the outburst of the Louisa towards his father, her father. How could you give me a life and take from me all the inappreciable things that rises it from the state of conscious death? Where are the grace of my soul? Where are the sentiments of my heart? What have you done, oh father? What have you done with the garden that should have bloomed once in this great wilderness here? In hard times, Dickens focus on the imagination and its importance. The story shown how a strict fact-based way of the living, like Mr. Great Grinds, does not meet a child's emotional or creative needs. The problem. Some critics says Dickens' use of the imagination shown through the circus is weak, and they think this weakens the story by accident. Our argument, but Dickens likely knew exactly what he was doing. He was not failing to show imagination as a strong. Fact versus imagination. Dickens' critique through Mr. Gradgrind's. Mr. Gradgrind's philosophy of the facts in the antithesis of the Dickens' belief in imagination. In the hard times, Dickens uses the Gradgrind's rigid fact-based education system as a symbolic attack on a society that denies creativity and emotion. By showing how Gradgrind's children, Louisa and Tom, grow up emotionally stunned and morally confused, Dickens demonstrate the destructive effects of a life without imagination. Thus, Gradgrind's world of the facts become a foil to the world of fancy and feeling represented by the sissy jupe and the circus. Through this contrast, Dickens argued that the imagination is not a luxury but a moral necessity essential for the empathy, balance, and genuine understanding of life. Gradgrind's fact-centered philosophy represents the suppression of the imagination. Dickens uses it to highlight that a purely factual education creates a mechanical minds, whereas imagination nurtures humanity. This chart, the utilitarian war of the fancy. Uh, Here, many aspects. The doctrine of the fact. It's related to promote a system that reject the imagination. Anything unmeasurable or emotional is dismissed as rubbish. It's symbolize represents rationalism and the rigidity, a mind stripped of the creativity. The suppression of the childhood. Education under grants rule crushes the curiosity and the creativity, training children to think only in fact and formulas. It symbolizes the death of the innocence and the loss of the imaginative wonder. The purpose of the utilitarianism, rationalist materialism under guise of the progress distorts imagination into narrowly selfish and the mechanical form. It shows how the industrial logic dehumanized the thought and the emotion. The utilitarian war on fancy, part 2. The product of the system, the character of the bidzer is ultimate fulfillment of the great grand's philosophy. Bidzer is a pure self-interested fact, calculated tons of the leverage. He is opposite of the CC. He cannot be reasoned with the morally as he lacks of the fundamental imaginative capacity for the sympathy or belief. The suppression of the imagination creates a moral vacuum, replacing love and sympathy with the cold economic self-interest. The circus characters, the disabled faculty, the ineffective refugee. The circus fails to function as a powerful heaven and largely unable to act in the plot, unlike earlier imaginative group in Dickens' work. This reflects Dickens' feeling that the imagination is doomed to an ineffectual existence. The broken slurry, his lisp and broken appearance suggest that the imagination is the weakened by reality and can't find a full, serious, natural outlet. The drunken clown Jude, his sadness and the drunkenness imply that the imagination cannot be fully serious or provide a secure transcendence escape, the offering only a dangerous comfort that quickly fades. The thematic pivot, imagination's insufficiency, the loss of transcendence, hard times is the first of the Dickens novel to lack a filling ending. This is the key of philosophical shift. The unidealness of the reality has become too strong for imagination to overcome. Imagination's limit Imagination limits its pure form, is only able to create an escape into unrealities. It is forced to know the ideal is not real, making it insufficient to counter the full weight of facts. The necessity of replacement. Dickens realized that the stronger force is needed to fight utilitarianism, serious belief or faith. CC Jupe and the supremacy of the faith. CC as a belief. CC Jupe is the central agent of the salvation, representing faith, the act of the belief itself. The nature of CC belief. Her faith in her absent father is held in defiance of reason, like religious conviction. This form of belief accept the idea as if were real, which is what pure imagination cannot do. Faith's function. Faith is necessary because it enables characters to see something higher beyond the immediate suffering of reality, thus avoiding resentment and rebellion. Redemption of imagination, the precursor to faith. The question: if the imagination is weak, how it salvage Dickens make it a necessary foundation for mature belief? The process: the fanciful, impossible dream of the childhood are converted through memory as we grow up. The result: this process converts the idea of the fancy into great charity in the art, which is a foundation of Christian or moral law. Key textual analysis. Remembrance of she had journeyed to little that she knew by enchanted road of what she and millions of innocent creatures had hoped imagined of how first coming upon reason through the tender light of fancy she had seen as beneficent God. The two gods, she saw reason as a beneficent God, differing to God as a great as itself, not a grim ideal cruel cold. Imagination represented by the tender light of fancy is a moral medium through the which reason should be viewed, preventing it from the becoming a grim ideal. Synthesis. Division novel ends with an unresolved division between reason linked with the Louisa and faith linked with the Sissy. Louisa's limitation: she is a doubting mind and cannot fully share Sissy's faith, proving that reason is cut off from belief. It fulfillment. The compromise: the ideal remains separate. Sissy's fulfillment is on level above reality. The ultimate function. Louisa guided Sissy can value the ideal she cannot attain. The imagination faith's final purpose is to provide the vision of the ideal necessary to bear the reality we are caught in. Learning outcome. Analyze Dickens' critique of the utilitarian philosophy of the fact in hard times. Explain the symbolic role of the key character like the Thomas Gradgrind, Louisa Gradgrind, Bitzer, Sissy Jupe, and the circus performance in the fact versus fancy conflict. Differentiate between the Dickens' initial presentation of the imagination as an ineffectual refugee and his later redemption of it's as a precursor to fate. Identify the explain the novel's thematic pivot where the focus shift from the imagination to faith as a stronger moral force against the reality and suffering. Interpret Louisa's reflection on the tender light of the fancy to understand how imagination should temper reason and prevent it from the becoming a grim idol. Conclusion. Hard time serves as a Charles Dickens powerful indictment of utilitarianism, which he critiqued for the being a dehumanizing system of the fact that starves the human spirit of the fancy. The novel demonstrates the failure through the moral crisis of Louisa Gradgrind, proving that a life built solely on the logic and statistics is a spiritual wilderness. While the initial portrays imagination as an insufficient refugee, Dickens ultimately elevates the fate embodied by the Sissy Jupe and the necessary moral foundation simulate uh, tenaciously redeem imagination as a tender light that prevent cold reason from becoming a grim idol. Thus, the final message is that compassionate society must embrace the poetic, imaginative, and the spiritual ideal to effectively temper reality and achieve true human fulfillment. This is work citation. Thank you. Questions are welcome.
So my question is, how does Dickens use Mr. Gradgrind to critique utilitarianism?
Dickens uses Mr. Gradgrind's obsession with the facts to show how a purely logical education destroys emotions and creativity through Gradgrind's children's unhappiness. Dickens exposes the emptiness of the life without imagination. Next.
So my question is, what role does Sissy Jupe play in the novel's moral message?
Sissy Jupe represent faith and emotional warmth that counter utilitarian coldness. Her belief and compassion redeems the imagination, showing that the faith and fancy are essential for the moral balance and true humanity. Thank you. This is from my side.
Happy evening, everyone. I am warmly welcome the audience to this insightful session. My name is SIDDHARTH CHAUHAN, and today I will going to present on a God is silent, society speaks, the death of divine order and rise of a human hypocrisy in Victorian literature. Here is my academic detail and presentation detail. Here is the table of content. Here is the research question and hypothesis. Research question is that how does Victorian literature reflects the transformation of religious faith into social, moral, intellectual hypocrisy, and what does this reveal about the human need to worship even in an age of unbelief? My hypothesis, which is truly connected with my content which I mentioned in my presentation, in Victorian literature, the decline of divine faith did not lead to moral liberation, but to a new form of a social worship, where respectability, reason, and reputation replaced God as the ultimate authorities. Introduction. When God fell silent, the Victorians didn't stop worshipping. They just changed gods. Here is the justification of my title. God is silent, society speaks. The Victorian lived in a world where God was still on the walls, but fading from the heart, faith began to lose its grips, and it's that silent society rushed to fill the void. They built new gods, money, marriage, and reputation, and worshipped them through appearances, not from the beliefs. Morality became something you performed, not practiced. That's where your journey begins today, in era that preached virtue but lived contradiction, an age that looked pure and the surface, yet quietly buried faith beneath the hypocrisy. First, we saw the crisis of faith, from worship to window dressing. The Victorians inherited a world built on a divine order, but science and industry soon shattered that foundation. Drawing questions, creation, machines replaced miracle. Suddenly, faith felt undoubted. Yet, instead of losing religion, society reinvented it. Prayer turned into a productivity. PT became a performance. People no longer ask, "Am I God?" but "Do I look God?" That at that age, people not ask that, "Am I God?" but they believe that, "Do I look as a God?" Virtue became something you displayed, not something you believed. Victorian society often masked morality, keep respectability, and marriage convention. That I'll take from the references. Dickens, the first key characteristic of this age, the gospel of the machines. Imagine being ruled not by kings, laws, or concise, but by machines. That age defined by that. Pictures a town where feelings are forbidden, and facts are law. That's Coke Town in hard times. Mr. Great Grind preaches fact alone are wanted in life, turning reason into a kind of a religion. Workers aren't people; they are sacrificed to industrial greed. Dickens isn't criticizing faith. He's warning us about a society that worships machine over humans. Sounds familiar? Today, our algorithms, productivity metrics, and data-driven lives echoes Cocktown creeds. The more things change, the more Dickens feels early modern. That is also relate us with our nowadays situation. Here, I am also embark one key quotation from my references. Industrialism replaced compassion. Facts became scripture. The second key major figure of this age is Thomas Hardy. When God dies, faith becomes a tyrant. Faith fails, suffering speaks. God's silence equal human suffering without a meaning. Hardy doesn't just question God. He shows a world where God seems absent, where religion offers no confront, only cruelty. In Jude the Obscure, Shrew Brighthead refused to submit neither to the church nor the desired society imposed on her. And what happens? She punished by both. Hardy captures this harsh truth with a line that echoes like a hammer. The letter killeth, it's not a blasphemy, it's a brutal honesty. Here the cross isn't symbol of a salvation. It becomes a question mark, forcing us to confront suffering that has no easy answer. Here I am also embark on key quotation from my references. Dickens portrays Coketown as a mechanized society where facts alone are wanted in life. The third key character, major figure of this age is Wilde, the religion of appearances, style over sincerity, Wilde's heretical comedy. Now let's step into the world of Oscar Wilde, a world where appearances are treated as sacred and a sincerity almost scandalous. In The Importance of Being Earnest, Wilde shows us a society that worship reputation as if it were religion. Here, morality isn't just about a turn or goodness, it's mask we wear, and hypocrisy is celebrated as a virtue. Even institutions like the church are not beyond fashion. Their authority becomes more about style than a substance, while himself puts it perfectly. In matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. While makes us a laugh, but it's sharp, a heretical laugh, a mirror to a world obsessed with appearances over authenticity. Morality became performance, social respectability replaced divine authority. It matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity in the vital king. Tennyson and Browning, faith in a fragments. In the Victorian age, faith shattered in fragments. Tennyson in Memoriam doesn't preach. It drives, it questions. He finds more faith in honest doubts than in hollow certainty. Browning, meanwhile, turns that doubt outward in a Calibian upon Stebus and My Last Duchess. In their works, man becomes the maker of his own goods, his own moral universe. For both poets, poetry itself replaces prayers. Their verse whispers on one truth. When beliefs collapse, about a doubt becomes the only sacred things left. Poetry reflects doubts and conditional faith. Their lives more faith in a honest doubt. The new morality, worship without a god, where people can't saw the gods and can't believe in the gods, but they most believes in the person who are on the who are in the authority. Let's begin with what I call the new morality: humanism or hypocrisy. What is the new morality? It's based on a humanism. Yeah, it is based on a hypocrisy. The Victorians prided themselves on a progress, science, reason, industry, yet they rebuilt morality in a God's image even after losing faith in him. Virtue became a kind of a self-made theology. That is the things in that age. They no longer prayed to heavens, but to society. Respectability replaced redemption. What used to be sin was now simply scandal. Prayer turned into a politeness, and salvation was measured not by grace but by a success. In short, they killed God, but keep his commandments to impress each other. That's the paradox of the Victorian souls. Moral on the surface, but faithless at the core. Here I'm also embark on key quotation that shows that Wilde enacts morality and performance, revealing society's hypocrisy in the absence of divine oversights. Conclusion: God's silence, society's echoes. As the Victorian world lost its faith, literature stepped in, not the preach, but the question. Writers like Dickens, Hardy, Wilde, Tennyson, and Browning became a prophet of a doubt. Their pages became a new kind of a Bible, written not for believers, but for those who searching in the silence. They exposed a society that wore virtue like a custom, morality performed, not practiced. Behind all the manners and morals was a desperate need to fill void where God once was. And maybe that's the heart of a Victorian struggle, the courage to keep living honestly in a godless world. As one might say, if there is no God, we must invent honesty. The Victorians looked to heaven and heard nothing. They created morality in their own image and called it virtue. Here is the justification of my hypothesis and research question. My hypothesis is that does the decline of divine faith free humanity or just create a new moral tyrants? Victorian literature shows is that later in hard times, machines and facts replace God. In Jude the Obscure, society punished the innocents when divine guidance is silent. In Wilde's family manners and reputation becomes new commandments. Tennyson and Browning reflect doubt and internalized moral rules. That shows that times works also show the situation of what Victorian age have. The research question, how literature portrays faith turning into humanity, morality, is answered. Society speaks just and often hypocritically ruled in God's absence. Morality does not vanish, it's mutes. That is the justification of my hypothesis and a research question. What is the literary outcomes of that? Faith in a silence. Victorian literature shows that when God remains silent, morality as a performance, suffering without a confront, doubt as an insight, humanism and hypocrisy. The main question of this age is where we believe in humanism and in hypocrisy. Modern resonance. Here is the overview summary of my presentation, from where you can understand thoroughly from my presentation. Here is the work cited, references. Thank you. Now creative minds invited to ask me the questions if they have.
So my question is, when society becomes God, who dares to question it?
When society becomes God, a few people dare to question it, because nowadays we believe that mass is always superior than a single person, and that is also we saw in the Victorian literature. There in the Hardy's works, in Dickens' works, where Sue Bytred's and Ernest also a single person who faced so many obstacles against the against the peoples. So that is the answer. Another question?
My question is that does rejecting faith make us freer or just create a new rules?
Rejecting a faith is not make us automatically freer, because without a ideal or a divine perception, people make rules and redemption by the societal norms, and that is also we saw in a Victorian society where the Wilde's works and in the Dickens works, world worshipped by, and also we saw that Sue Bytred's character suffering from so many societal norms and expectations. So the answer is that who are in ruled, who are in a moral order, who is always suffered by the so many things. So that is the answer. That is from my side. Thank you.
Okay, so that was the last one. Okay. Yeah, this I have started. So a quick feedback. Let's start with the last one. Okay, so Siddharth, very well presented on this topic and quite well connected. All the significant text and a good summary slide also was prepared to showcase that which is the punchline which represent the text and how it can be justified. So good rhyming words also were selected to give a better title to the slides. Worship to window dressing, gospel of machine. God dies, then fate becomes tyrant. Okay? These were very good points that you have selected and presented quite well. Then Mulraj talked on hard times, concept of imagination. That also you have taken from a very good article, which you have cited and referred to also, where both the arguments are given that what way the imagination and the fact interplays, and also what is the downside of imagination. Circus characters also were critically looked upon to prove the point that ideal is not real. Ideal is not real. That also was there. So limitations of imaginations were also given there. But you also, like many other, was reading the answers. So it gives an impression that the questions are given in advance, like many politicians do before the interviews. They give the questions in advance, and so they are well prepared for the answers. So you have to take extempore questions, whatever question comes on the spot, and that you have to try to justify orally, okay, instead of reading the answers. Nidhi also did well. Ibsen's play, and Doll's House is quite well known, but the other works like Enemy of the People, that also was referred cost also. So that's a good reminder that how this Enemy of the People also is a very good play, which is not referred a lot nowadays by the people, but it gives a good idea. There were very good questions also by Priya and Sagar to connect it with social media misinformation or Godi media things there. And were quite well answered also. Priya presented well on psychological depth in Browning's monologues, dramatic monologues. Good slides were prepared. Sources also were very well collected and presented. Sagar also did well. Hardy as a poet, determinism and authentic voice, how he is looking for that as a poet. Good article from Taylor and Francis. You have cited time and mutability in the poems of Hardy. And also there was a good question like, is Hardy in another form of art apart from poem and novels? And you also replied while reading the thing. So it was not well prepared answer. The answer seems to be prepared in advance, because when you speak orally, you fumble for words, you search for the words, but a very quality words keeps on flowing automatically, naturally. That gives an idea that this is a pre-prepared answer. It is not extempore coming there. You talked about short stories, drama, dynasts. Dynast नाम एम अचानक याद ना આવી જાય. કોઈ અચાનક પ્રશ્ન પૂછે કે થોમસ હાર્ડીનું નાટક, તો એ વાંચ્યું હોય તો યાદ કરતા વાર લાગે. ઓટોમેટિકલી ડાયનેસ્ટ બોલાઈ જાય તો એ પૂર્વ તૈયારી કરી રાખેલી છે કે આ પ્રશ્ન પૂછાય તો આ જવાબ આપવાનો. But he also was in architecture. He was also in music. He was a violinist also for a local Ras Garba kind of event. વેસેક્સમાં નાના મોટા ગરબાઓ થતા રહેતા. ખેતી પ્રધાન મુલક હતો એટલે ત્યાં પણ લોકો વાર તહેવારે રાસ ગરબા રમતા રહે, તો એમાંય કોઈ વાયોલિન વગાડે. So he was a violinist there also. He was a book illustrator also. He had a training in art. So the illustrations in the short stories books are also done by him. He was good at that way in art also. So in visual arts also he has done good work. Priyanka on Jude, anti-hero, existentialism. So the modernist elements, which we are going to discuss in next semester. But how the writers like Ibsen or Hardy, they were writing in Victorian era, but they had these elements of modernity. And it was being seen in advance before the era was supposed to come. Some of the elements of modernity were reflected in Ibsen or Hardy. So this was about existentialism, anti-hero that was given. You also answered very well, which gives us the idea that it is all pre-planned questions and answers. One marker was there, like dynast was one marker in the previous one. So when you answer, you give 4 examples. So that rarely comes. When you naturally answer, if that style comes, it is very good. Whenever you answer anything, that pattern you can pick up. Wherever you might have asked for the answer, some generative AI tool might have suggested क्या રીતે જવાબ આપવાનો. એની પેટર્ન તમે શીખી લો તો બહુ કામ લાગે કે કઈ રીતે કે આમ જવાબ આપી 2 લાઈનમાં, પછી ઉદાહરણ આપવાનું. For example, this. So that gives, it's a good pattern to learn that how to answer the questions whenever it is asked. Mitali also did well, presented well. Kruti also presented well. Marriage norms in the Victorian era and the legalities of those days, that also was brought. So quite well presented with good examples and other things. SIDDHARTH G. CHAUHAN, on hard times and modern echoes, you need to keep on improving, keep on speaking more. So you will come out from the tongue-tiedness and will be able to speak fluently. SANDHYA, Dickens, and a rebel against rationalism and emotionalism. This in this kinds of write-up, the one which we have seen earlier was having good examples. That was by, I think, Mulraj. In that, there were these points that when Dickens tries to be a rebel against rationalism, how he is making some mistakes also. That also are the important point that needs to be seen there. In our times, that way of reading is very important. Today, if we tell that don't go for facts and emotionally believe in the truth, then it is very dangerous. Now we say Don't do that. That's why post-truth means something in which we emotionally believe as truth. We think emotionally this is truth. So that point we have to bring, that how Dickens can be misread in our times also. Vanita also presented well on education. I have shared two videos worth watching, one by Sir Ken Robinson and another by Sugata Mitra. And both of them are connecting education system. Ken Robinson is making a critique of American education system, which to a greater extent is way ahead of India. And Sugata Mitra is talking about Indian system also. But both of them are making critique of Victorian model. Sugata Mitra, you will listen that the school education system of Victorian was very powerful. And so powerful that even today you can't break it. Today also, he will give an example that 3 R's were very important in the Victorian education system: reading, writing, and arithmetic. Arithmetic means arithmetic, simple plus minus. And the Victorians, this all East India Company, and they wanted the people who are very good in simple mathematics to calculate profit and loss, the business that they were doing. There should be a good writer, so handwritings are eligible to the people back home. If it is written like the way you write in the answer books, then it becomes difficult to read. So good handwriting is necessary. Today, when we will suggest you also, when you will write your answer test and when we will evaluate, we will also tell you that write in good handwriting. Now, this is Victorianism. Why it is relevant even today? Because we have to read your answer books. Victorians had another objective, that you serve for them. Whatever you are writing, we should be able to read back home. Anybody who picks up the writing. So the importance of good handwriting was there. Sugata Mitra would say that today when everybody is typing everything, what is the need of good handwriting? People, when you will be doing any job, rarely you will be required to write anything. Anything that you have to submit will be in typed form. You become a lawyer, a clerk, a talati mantri, a teacher, anything that you become. Everybody will expect you give documents in typed format, not handwritten. So then why we still have handwriting or importance to handwriting in our exam? Why we have, we know, because humans are going to read that. Humans can't read if any way it is written. So teachers have a terrible passions of reading variety of handwritings. AI also fails there. AI can also not read all this variety of handwritings, which humans can do. But that was Victorian model of giving importance to writing. There were no calculators, so memory was required. Tables were required. This 1 1s are 1, 1 2s are 2. These tables were very much required for arithmetic. So they had that system that abdu gokhao, badaye gokhi rakhwan, ke pahada kem paka karwa, and a poetry ma convert kari nakho. And then you claim it because you wanted to serve. Today we have calculators. There is no need to do that. You have a simple calculators in mobile device, so no need. But this is how the Victorian system is still not breaking. It is still so strong. So Vanita or anybody who thinks, you have to see that in last 10 years, you also have passed through education system. So how do you feel? How do you connect that with your own education systems, where your schools also like grinds schools, or there were different kind of schools there? And what difference does it make? Kadach different પ્રકારની હોય, આપણે ત્યાં સર્કસ જેવું જ હોય, તો આપણે ક્યાં IAS ઓફિસર થઈ ગયા છે કે એનાથી બહુ ફાયદો થયો હોય? કરવા તો પાછા BA કરીને એમ જ આવ્યા છે. આપણે હજી IAS ટ્રેનિંગ સેન્ટરમાં બેઠા હોઈએ તો આપણે કહી શકીએ કે જો આ સિસ્ટમમાંથી I became IAS officer. So how we judge the thing that whatever system we have undergone, what we have become and what we may become, still the future lies there. You may become a collector also, and then you can say that now I am collector. Then I was not there, but now I am. Possibilities are always there with everybody to grow. But connecting with personal experience is always very important. GRISHMA also presented well with about importance of being earnest. Radhika and Mansi asked good questions regarding influencer culture and what would Oscar Wilde write today. And his style is a very humorous style, satirical. His all quotes are very popular even today. His Oscar Wilde has a very crooked way of looking at society, very deconstructive way of looking at society and make fun of the Victorian hypocrisy. We can say that the heights of hypocrisy much higher, that all these writers were fed up with those kinds of things, and so they were making fun, satire. They were not liked by the hypocritical society also. So even Oscar Wilde has a very tragic end. His queer relation or LGBTQ, his being gay, was caught, and then he has to leave England, and he died somewhere in France. So those things were not acceptable in England. Today, that's why we connect that from where this queer way of looking at third gender has come in India. It was not during Mughal time. It was not so. Even before there, it was not so. It was because after Victorians who came here. The people who ruled India were Victorians. They gave lots of importance to religion there. So they were highly religious people. So when people connect atheism with English people, it is a wrong connection. Indians were atheists before Mughal or English also. Indians already had, like, that's why we say that Buddhism or Jainism, they are atheist religions. So it is not, atheism is not influence of English. English people were very religious. That's what we are studying, religiosity in Victoria. Those were the people who came with East India Company. They ruled during those era. So those influence, narrowness that we have is coming from the English society. Too much of those narrowness. We try to be proud of that narrowness by calling it Indian Sanskriti. But actually it is a British, it was a British Sanskriti. British people also came out from that. But we still are held up in many of those things. So influential culture and how he would write, or today's social norms of today, and how would he write. You can do the generative AI activity and prepare a short video or other things by asking generative AI to make a small scene in the style of Oscar Wilde. Keeping in mind today's scene, how would he write? And then you can see what he is writing, and then you can give to Notebook LM, and it can also prepare a short video on the dramatic performance or a podcast of how those dialogues might go. Radhika also presented well. You are improving, but still you need to work on your presentations, layout and other thing. MLA, APA style also are confused, so that also you see how, what is the difference between MLA style and APA style. Mansi also presented well. SIDDHIBA also did well. Triviality and seriousness in importance of being earnest, and then Sanjay also presented on irony and this in importance of being earnest. Okay, fine. So we are seeing a slight improvement for what you have done on the first day. In 4 days also, we see that everybody is improving the quality of the things there. Wish you all the best for tomorrow's presentation. Tomorrow you have a last presentation. We end this today here.